Well, last year when we spoke to you here from the beautiful town of Deinze on the Belgian canals, by the time we got down to Wevelgem, it was the German rider Burkhardt who'd taken it out. Well, since then, of course, Burkhardt's team's gone, Team Mobile. He's now part of Team High Road, and now it's the 70th running of Ghent Wevelgem. Paul, 209 kilometres. We always talk about it being the bridge between Paris-Roubaix and Tour de Flanders.
Yeah, that's the strange thing about this race. It's caught in between two mega classics of the world of professional cycling, but it is also a race that's a very specialised race for the sprinters. And over the years, although we've said it's dominated by the sprinters, very often a breakaway has managed to slip clear down towards the end.
Well, there's no doubt, I think sometimes we say this every year, this really has drawn a great field this year. All of the riders have stayed on from the Tour de Flanders. They're thinking, of course, of Paris-Roubaix. Mark Cavendish, the British sprinter who's on top form, is here, so too Tom Bonan, etc. Paul, it's your turn again today to go down and chat with them.
Well, that's what I like doing. It's a good chance here, actually, at Ghent Wevelgem, because the riders are just a little bit more relaxed than they are at the start of the Ronde van Vlaanderen.
Let's go down and meet some.
Yeah, no.
How's the form, mate?
Oh, it's
Sweet looking ride.
It's okay, but Flandern wasn't that good really. Form was okay, but I mean the legs weren't good enough to be right up front. But the Kwarmont too far back. The group was already gone. We caught them like just going into Koppenberg, but then only like, I don't know, the first 15 riders they got over, and the rest had to walk. Then got caught behind that. Then yeah, it's pretty much over then. So.
Pretty crazy racing in Belgium, but today's a different day. Today is the Ghent Wevelgem racing. This really is all about the Kemmelberg.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this year it's a bit different. Like the downhill, they changed that because last year there was like really bad crashes. I crashed too last year. I was in hospital, and yeah, I mean, I hope that a group goes and it doesn't come to a big sprint like 80, 90 riders. I hope it'll be like a small group, 30 riders, and just go. Hope that it'll be a sprint and go good on that.
That's be a quick question. There's a little bit of a confusion about whether or not you want to continue your life as a German or as an Australian.
Yeah, it's something I've been thinking about the last year because like every time I go back to Australia, like my parents still live there, I go back for Christmas each year. They I feel more and more Aussie. Like when I go back, I feel like more that like I'm at home there, and but I mean I still love it here. Like I've got my girlfriend here. I've been living here for the last 10 years, so. Just see what happens in the next few years, like the World Championships in Australia in 2010, and that's something that I'd like to ride. Also, maybe the Olympics in a few years when I'm a bit older. And I mean, I've got the possibility. Like my dad's German, and my mum's Australian, so I can choose. I'm pretty lucky enough that I can choose which country I want to ride for. But I think later on that I'll be riding for Australia because that's definitely where I want to live later on when I stop cycling.
All right, well, good. I'll follow that story because I'm in the same boat because I can't make my mind up whether I'm African or English.
Okay.
See you later.
Right, yeah, no worries. Thanks.
See you, mate. Thanks a lot. Chris, it's been a long time since I've been following your career, and finally you're going to be the first Kenyan rider to race in Ghent Wevelgem. Quite an honour.
That's right. I'm actually going to correct you there. I've now changed my nationality to become British, so no longer Kenyan.
Why is that?
I'm sure, as you know, there are a lot of problems back home. When I say home, I mean Kenya, and in the sports federation especially, there's a lot of problems.
We know about all of those problems, but anyway, that's not why you're here today. You're here for Ghent Wevelgem. Fast learning curve.
Definitely. For me, it's been a steady sort of progression. Last couple of years, been jumping one step at a time, and it's great to be here.
I think it's important too to have a rider like Robbie Hunter on the same team because he can teach you an awful lot.
Definitely, he's got a lot of experience behind him, and I'm definitely learning a lot from him.
Okay, good luck today.
Brilliant, thanks a lot.
Well, Tom, it's great to see you here at Ghent Wevelgem. We keep thinking that you might retire, but you seem to love the sport as much as ever.
I always love the sport, but this is my last season. Another 2 months and then I retire. So it's been enough.
Well, this is the kind of race that you've always liked. What is your future with the team? Is it to stay alongside and become a director sportif, or will you move away from the sport? The sport needs a lot of help at the moment.
The sport needs a lot of help, yeah, especially for the riders with everything. But I don't know yet. I'm still riding in my head. After June, and we're gonna see what we're gonna do. I have some ideas, but not really concrete.
Okay, well, good luck today.
Thanks.
Robbie, great to see you here. It's always tough this time of the year because there's a lot of stress on riders' shoulders in races like Ghent Wevelgem.
Yeah, it is. It's obviously, it's a period of 2 weeks where, there's a lot of big races, Flanders, Wevelgem, Roubaix, and like you say, a lot of pressure on the riders, a lot of pressure on teams to get results. But yeah, I mean, I suppose the riders can only deliver what they can.
I'm quite happy to see that Team Barlow World have signed up a Kenyan rider, Chris Froome, although he's going to probably race under a British license this year. It's nice, I said to him, to have somebody like you on board to show him the ropes.
Yeah, look, Chris he's a huge talent. Like you say, racing on a Kenyan license at the moment might be English a little bit later on, but a huge talent, great guy. I think he's got a huge career ahead of him. Lots to learn, but I think the motor that he's got, he's going to be a super climber for the future.
I spoke yesterday to Tom Bone and we were talking about sprinters and talking about rivals, and I said, well, what about Robbie Hunter? He said, well, Robbie Hunter's not really a pure sprinter, but he's a really strong rider who I always have to respect. That's quite a compliment.
I'll have to pay Tom later for that one. Yeah, I think Tom's right. I'm not a pure sprinter, but I think when I'm at my best, it's I can sprint, I can kind of get over the major climbs, and I think that's one of the things that kind of helps. I think for the green jersey and the tour, and this year obviously it's a big objective for me. So if I can kind of get the form to where it should be for the tour, that's what I want to try and do.
Okay, well, enjoy again Wevelgem today.
Magic, thanks.
Stewie, Tour of Flanders, a pretty tough race. I think one of the toughest I've seen with the weather conditions.
Yeah, that was a really bad day. Sure, it made good television, but from our point of view, it was pretty nasty.
Difficult to recover from a race like that. That's what makes, I think, this week so difficult, because you've got a tough Tour of Flanders, Ghent, Wevelgem on the back of it, riding over the cobbles to train, and then Paris-Roubaix a few days later.
Yeah, if you're, it's a really tough week. By the end of the, next Monday, you feel like you've been through a car crash. It's pretty hardcore on the body, and yeah, I wasn't up there on Sunday. I wasn't, just didn't rate the cold. So I abandoned ship as soon as I could to try and just not ride out there in the freezing cold.
After your nasty accident of last year, you must be quite happy now that the organisers of this race have actually changed the route a little bit to make it safer for the riders, and they've taken out the nasty descent to the Kemmelberg. Yeah,
I mean, it's a pretty wise decision, I think. I mean, it only, it didn't have too much of an effect on the overall results of the race. It just usually broke a few guys' bones. So, I think it's good of the organisation. I mean, I never had any problems there personally, but every year there seem to be some pretty devastating crashes. So, let's just move the race on and try and look after the guys a little bit.
Okay, well, the weather's good today. Fine-tuning for Paris-Roubaix or going for the win?
More fine-tuning. It'd be nice for the morale to be up the pointy end of the race at the end, and basically just try and keep out of trouble.
Okay, good luck.
Thanks, mate.
It's strange to see a Spanish rider so motivated by these crazy races, Tour of Flanders and Paris-Roubaix. Why do you like them so much?
Well, I like the atmosphere in every race, in every Flanders race, and the cobbles, the small roads, the wind, the bad weather, sometimes snow like last Sunday, and the dangerous corners. So it's a little bit of everything that gives me a lot of motivation, a lot of morale to do my best here.
So today, Ghent Wevelgem, is that more a race for Oscar Freire? And are you thinking more of Sunday and Paris-Roubaix?
Yeah, today is lack of wind, so it means going to be a bit bunch sprint in the final, even if the camel seems to be a bit harder, a bit longer. I will try in the camel, but well, my expectation still is going to do the best on Sunday.
Okay, thank you. Muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Well, Mark, congratulations on the World Championships just the other day. That must have been a nice relief for the start of the season.
It's a nice way to start off the winning streak anyway, so yeah, I was very happy.
This is a race that we all regard as being a big sprinter's race, and you're making your name as a big sprinter in the field. A lot of pressure on your shoulders today to do well in Ghent Wevelgem.
Yeah, I don't know if it's pressure, and there's no pressure from myself, there's no pressure from the team, but I think a lot of my fans and I expect it, I think, so maybe I can do something. Obviously it's my first big classic, so we can either go one of two ways. It'll go really good or really bad. We'll just have to see it.
I think what Team High Road have shown after their great performance in the Tour of Flanders at the weekend is that it's actually a solid classics team, and that's what's important, to have a lot of men around you towards the end.
Well, if you see in our team, we've got guys actually fighting for places in the classics teams. usually in other teams you've got a couple of big names and everyone else is told whether they're riding. Here everybody wants to race, you know, and you know we've got the morale so well that everybody works so well together. We've got so many big names in the team, but they're not big names that are selfish, they're big names that want to work well for the team. So I think all year that's shown how well we ride together.
You got the experience of Big George Hincapie here as well, because Hincapie in fact has been a winner of this race in the past, and he can pilot you to the win today maybe.
I hope so. We've got two winners here from the past with George and Andreas Clear, and obviously Roger was second last year. We've got Savasi won Paris-Roubaix. You know, we've got so many opportunities. I think we're foolish if we go into this race wanting just a one sprint, you know, for me, I think, because I think we've got 7 guys because Andre Greipel's not starting because he's sick, so we've got 7 guys here capable of winning, so.
Good luck today.
Thanks very much.
There we go. Some bloody guys in our hotel last night making a hell of a lot of noise. It was all the Hincapie brothers and...
Yeah, they come every year and they have a great time. I'm jealous they can come hang out and drink beers with you guys, but one year I'll be doing the same thing.
I'm sure you will, but for today it's again Wevelgem, important. You've won this race before, Andreas Clear's won the race before, but Mark Cavendish is quite a rapid little rider if it all comes down to a bunch sprint at the end.
Oh yeah, definitely. If it comes down to a bunch, we're going to be looking at him. He's the fastest guy in the world right now, and he's a real pleasure to race with. I really enjoy racing with him, and we'll do what we can for him at the end.
But if you've got a chance, you'd like to win this race again, because having been a former winner, you know what it's like to cross the line in first place.
Yeah, this is a wonderful race. It was awesome winning it last time. If I see the opportunity, I'll try something, but my main focus right now is Sunday.
I just wanted to ask you one thing, because it's been a big change for you this year. You've been basically in the same team structure since Motorola, since US Postal Service, Discovery Channel. Now you're on a different squad. Are you happy with the guys around you?
Oh yeah, this is awesome. We got guys with so much experience, guys that have won Roubaix, and you know we have in the team meetings, they know which way the wind's coming. They tell you every inch of the road. It's just and they're a lot of fun to be around with. So it's been great so far.
You sound quite happy.
Definitely, very happy.
Good luck.
All right, thanks, Paul.
He's going for it today. How are you, mate?
Yeah, not bad, not bad.
Nice to see you. Been a bit quiet this year, but this is your kind of race.
Yeah, well, I was just telling Phil, it's taken me a while to get into form and find some condition due to one thing and another. I got sick around the early March. Right before that, I had a pretty nasty crash in Portugal, which put me back quite a few weeks. So for the last month, I've just been trying to get myself back in shape and you know, get myself in the sort of condition that a professional bike rider should be in. And now I feel like I'm back at a good level. So it's about time I won something.
Well, these are your kind of races, and this is a definite race for your kind of sprint. But there's a new kid coming through at the moment, and he idolizes you. His name is Mark Cavendish. What do you think of him?
Yeah, he told me last week he wants to be me. I said, well, you'll have to go to the beautician a few times first, mate.
That's pretty good. Do you think you've got the form to win the race this afternoon? The Kemmel is a little bit easier now because they've made it just a fraction safer.
Well, first say about Cav, he's a good kid, a big talent, and it's nice for my ego that he idolises me, or wants to be like me, and he's a very similar type, so go a long way. This race, again, Wevelgem, it's a race that suits me. Some short, sharp climbs, but not too many of them. They've got a new run into the Kemmel this time, so we'll see if that shakes things up or makes it safe or makes it worse. You don't know. It's always a half a lottery here in Ghent Wevelgem, especially the way it's between Tour of Flanders and Paris-Roubaix. Are guys just here training? Are they still too tired? Are they fresh? So there's a lot of questions, and they're all answered on the finish line.
Absolutely. Good luck.
Righto, thanks.
Stein, that was a phenomenal performance on Sunday. Did you really believe at 25 kilometers to go you could pull it off?
Yeah, I knew I had a chance because I had very good legs, and I look around me and I saw all tired riders. But it's a dream to win Tour of Flanders. I still can't believe it now.
It's a very special dream as well to win it, especially with the jersey that you're wearing at the moment, the Belgian national champion. You became only the 4th man ever to do that. Have you thought about that?
I didn't know before that there were only 4 who did it before me, and the 4 who did it were really great champions. And
you're a pretty great champion yourself, but I think you have a lot of help and advice coming from your friend Dirk de Mol.
Yeah, he's also very, very happy with this win because we worked hard on it for a couple of years. to make this this great victory. And also the rest of the team had an amazing team on Sunday.
Good luck.
Thank you.
And these are some of the few most recent winners since 1998, when Frank van den Broeke was the winner, just ahead of the former champion of Belgium, Tom Steels, who's announcing his retirement halfway through this year. Well, we're looking here at the standings in the UCI Pro Tour. This is event number 3 here. Andre Greipel, though, with 62 points after his victory in the Tour Down Under. He, in fact, has not started today. He's apparently sick after a rather wet and snowy ride around Flanders in the Tour of Flanders. So he's more or less destined today to lose his overall leader's white jersey. This is the route now. We start in Deinze. It's a total distance of 209 kilometres. For a while we head in an easterly direction. We don't go out to the coast as we used to do. We then plunge south towards Popperinge. That's, Paul, where it all begins.
That's where the circuits around the mountains, or the mountains of Flanders, begin. The Verdijenberg, Rodeberg, Monteberg and Kemmelberg all ascended 2 times before they get to the finish in Wevelgem, as you said, after 209 kilometres.
So this is the bridge between the Tour of Flanders and the Paris-Roubaix, and this, of course, the Spring Classics, although the weather is a little bit sharp just now. They could do with a little bit more heat. It's hard to imagine 1 year ago many people were wearing shorts watching this event. This is the entertainment earlier today at the start of the race down in Ghent. Danilo Napolitano of Lampre coming in to sign in. I must say, Paul, the Belgians do the great job of introducing the riders to the crowd here.
Well, they certainly make it a great show. This is Gregory Raster from Team Astana, who rode a very solid Ronde van Vlaanderen at the weekend. And he's a man who will be looking, I think, to consolidate on that performance today. Tom Steels, he's a great rider. We've been expecting him to retire, Phil, I think, for the last 5 years. But he still loves the sport of professional cycling.
Yes, and well, it's hard to get it out your blood, I must say. Another rider who's bang on form too is Kurt Assel Arvesen here of Team CSC. Had a great ride in the Tour of Flanders. Wouldn't surprise me in the least if he wins this one today. The sprinter from Australia, new colours for him this year, Barlow World. This is Baden Cook.
Well, Cookie will be looking for the win here this afternoon, but I would think the Belgians would expect a win that could possibly come from this man, Philippe Gilbert, who is in fine form this season with a very dominating win in Het Volk in the early part of the year.
Yes, he's had the best start ever to a season. Gianni Meersman also on the same team here as Philippe Gilbert. Gianni, much younger than Gilbert, and really is a great talent for the future, and he's well suited to the roads today. And the Paris-Roubaix winner of 1 year ago, still smiling, Stuart O'Grady, followed by Alessandro Ballan, 4th in the Tour of Flanders a few days back.
After a very nasty crash as well. He says that that crash slowed him down a little bit in the finale, but he'll be looking for a bit of revenge, I think, on Sunday. A little bit further back, we've got riders signing in from Astana. This is Dmitry Muriaviev. And Team Astana here, I think, will be looking to try and do something on a race like this, especially with Dirk de Mol in the team car.
Gert Steegmans from Quickstep, who took on Tom Bonen, his teammate in Ghent, not very far away, of course, in the Tour de France last year, and won the stage. Also having made a terrific start to the year, Juan Antonio Fletcher, the Spanish rider on the Dutch squad Rabobank, 3rd in the Tour of Flanders, highest ever finish the other day for a Spanish rider in that event.
Mark Cavendish starting with a big 4 stars on his shoulders. He is one of the top favourites to win the race this afternoon. And a man here, Eric Zabel, has always been competitive in Paris-Roubaix and Wevelgem. And of course, a couple of years ago, he had a horse jump on him.
That's right, he had to catch the horse, and Eric didn't fall off. This is Fabian Cancellara, also on form. The flashes of the ex-world champion Tom Bonen on his shoulder cuffs there. He's also getting a huge cheer from the crowd here in the square. Always comes late. The race is almost about to start. George Hincapie was very strong in the Tour of Flanders, looking for a result, a past winner of this event. And he'd like to also, of course, score well on Sunday in Paris-Roubaix.
Greg van Avermaet, the winner of the Grand Prix E3. He's a rider who over the last couple of years has seriously started to make a name for himself. But in there as well is his teammate Robbie McEwen, who is actually saying that today he's looking for a performance.
Frederik Willems, I think, is due to come up alongside Robbie. And another rider who is going to do pretty well, I think, today. He's another up-and-comer. This is Oscar Freire here, who's also amongst the favourites, and hopefully he'll be able to unleash that sprint towards the end. He was 3rd in this race last year.
Well, this man outlived a childhood dream a couple of days ago by winning the Ronde van Vlaanderen. But I think on top of that was more important for him, Phil, it was in the national champions jersey.
And the winner in 2006, Thor Hushovd. Good sprint on that occasion, got in ahead of David Kopp of Germany. And Thor likes this sort of weather. He likes it pretty crispy and cold, he said, because he's a man of the far north. And Philippe Pazzato, almost the last man to come in to sign on today. He is literally about a minute away from the start. He'll have to catch up as we now move down the road and out on course. And as you saw there, the fields of Flanders looking a little bit bleak today, but the sun is out. There's no forecast of rain. One man is heading towards Wevelgem in first place, and Marno Capelli from Sonia Duval, a new professional. And just look at the gap, because nobody knows him. They've given him a lead of 10 minutes.
Well, he's got a lead of 10 minutes, but 87 kilometres to go. It's a tall order for a lone rider to succeed and survive in a breakaway situation like this, because once we get to the two circuits of those small mountains of Flanders, or the Heuvelland as they call it down here, the main field are certainly going to accelerate up to speeds in excess of 45 kilometres an hour, and then they will really start to eat into this man's advantage.
Well, these are the long open roads now. Sonia Duval is a Spanish team, and Capelli here is an Italian rider on it. And the Italians always seem to manage to produce some good results at this time of the year in Belgium, when the terrain nor the climate itself suits them. But Capelli went early today. He's heading now towards the Kemmelberg, and in the far south, those few little bergs which we cover on the 2 times round the circuit. We do each climb twice. They've amended the course very slightly this year because of the multiple crashes we got on the way down the Kemmelberg last year. The most injured, I think, were Jimmy Casper and Tyler Farrar of the USA, but they're back in the racing's colours again now. But I have to say that the circuit has been modified slightly. They've tried to make it a little bit more difficult to approach the bottom of the Kemmelberg, and instead of hitting it first time from the left, we'll turn right onto it, and then once over the top, we won't go down over the terrifying cobblestones. They'll filter them off to the left down a tarred road. That sounds great, but the drawback is it's a very tricky descent and a very sharp right-hand bend to bring them back onto the race route. So we're all intrigued to see how they cope with that.
As you say, it is going to be very tricky, very narrow, but I think the idea really is to try and make it just that little bit safer for the riders, because that descent off the Kemmelberg, I have to say, I've done it a number of times in race conditions. It is very scary, even though it's a straight line. It's such a bouncy descent, you can actually hardly see where you're going.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I've done it once myself, and your crash helmet slips over your eyes because of the multiple vibrations, and then you go down literally on a wing and a prayer, I think. Well, this is the rear of the big peloton here. You can tell by the speed they're going. The sun is up on the right shoulder, but there's no great urgency here because everybody knows that this race will be decided on those 2 circuits out in the country. They're not there yet, and it's a long run-in from the final ascent of the Kemmelberg down to Wevelgem for the finish, and plenty of time to finish off any breakaways that might still survive. Rick Verbrugge here, former prologue winner of the fastest ever prologue in the Giro d'Italia, but he hasn't won a race for 3 years now, and so he's here more as a helper, I think, as time runs out for him as a pro.
Yes, but he's turned out to be a very good helper in recent classics. He rode a superb Ronde van Vlaanderen at the weekend in support of his teammate Nick Nuyens, who got himself a very good second place. You can see a little bit of nervousness appearing at the front end of the main field, and a young cyclist out there enjoying his 100 or 250 metres alongside the peloton of Ghent Wevelgem, but I'm sure he won't be able to continue that until the finish line here in Wevelgem.
Have to look at some of the faces here. One rider in the right race here from Silence Lotto, which is the teammate of the rider in our camera just now in the red, is Nicky Gates from Australia. He got a phone call very late last night. One of the riders on the team was ill. Would he mind taking part today? He's scheduled to ride tomorrow in the Pinot Cerami race, which is down in the Ardennes of Belgium, near Mons. So now he's doing both. They haven't withdrawn him from the other one, but he's out here today. We'll see how he goes.
It's Henrik Hausler there in the pale blue. On the right-hand side, in the middle, in the green and white of Crédit Agricole, is Mark Renshaw. He's a guy who, if he can get himself over the cobbled climbs today, has got a very good chance of taking the victory. And the big rider in the middle there from Silence Lotto is Bert Rooms, a very good individual time trialist. And I stood next to him at the start this morning, Phil, and he towered above me. I thought he was actually a basketball player.
He is a massive guy, he certainly is. I must say, Paul, looking out, it looks a little bit better today than it did when we were peering out of our commentary box at Meerbeker, Ninove, which is where the finish line was for Tour of Flanders. Not too far away from where we are today. Here we are, Marno Capelli, Kop van der Wedstrijd out in front, the man in the lead, 84 kilometres, that's just over 50 miles to race. and the town we keep getting glimpses of is Popperinga, and that's really where we're heading for now. Once around the outskirts of Popperinga, we're heading down towards the Kemmel and over there onto the circuits, and I think that's where we'll see, just seeing the front of the peloton there, the tempo's beginning to build. The boys have got a fast tempo riding, not too many teammates of Capello. I can't think for when these guys break away on their own, it can never be planned. He would like a little group with him. It hasn't worked out, and they've thrown into the dogs, I'm sure.
Well, this is his first year as a professional rider on the top end of the sport, and he will have been in a situation where he made an attack and actually succeeded, so he's probably regretting it at the moment, but he has got the advantage of making his name aware to the general public for the first time. We now will remember Capelli as a rider who made a long breakaway in Ghent Wevelgem, but he realizes, I'm sure, and he will have had the advice and counseling of his team management, that this is more than likely what we call in the sport a suicide attack, because it's very difficult for a lone man to survive another 80 kilometers. He's looking at another 2 hours and 10 minutes in the saddle, and his 10 minutes and 10 seconds advantage will get quickly wiped away as we go through the feeding station here, the bevor riding as they call it in Flemish, and this is just in the outskirts of Poperang.
So time to start thinking about now. We're 115 kilometers or so into the race, slightly more, and it looks as though one rider's decided to not just take his food but to take the car as well. Well, the Cofidis rider there pulling out of the race. A lot of these riders here today choose this nice 100 to 200 kilometers. There it is as well. It looks like it's Verbrugge who might have called it a day there. Paul Rick Verbruggen it is. He's done just enough. The professionals who are thinking of hopefully doing a good ride in Paris-Roubaix on Sunday, just doing a couple of hours or 3 in the saddle today, fast tempo, and then go home and watch the finish on television, because they're thinking of the big one, which is the Queen of the Classics on Sunday from Paris down to Roubaix. The field now, I think, are going to pick this one up as they continue through the field. They've got about 90 kilometers, 82 kilometers to go, so we're looking at around about 140 kilometers or less now already covered. So it's a good useful training miles for Rick Verbrugge today.
It certainly is. It's an important race as well for Team Cofidis at the weekend, because Cofidis is actually based in Roubaix. They're just on the outskirts of town, not too far away from the stadium. So for them, the race on Sunday is going to be exceptionally important. A chance to see how the riders risk their lives at the back there. And you can see as they go around that traffic circle there, they're taking all kinds of risks to use both the pavement and the cycle path at the side of the road.
Well, the gap is coming down now. It is 9 minutes 55, so they slipped inside the 10-minute margin. That's the reversal taking place now as they continue the tempo. This race, which started a long time ago, is one of the more modern classics. We're only on to event number 70 here, whereas most of the classics are now heading up into the hundreds. But even so, it's only been conquered by 12 nations over all of the years. Belgium are outstanding with 46 wins in this event. But they haven't won it since 2005, when Nico Martin, you may remember, was accused of catching the back end of a motorbike in the last kilometre. I, for one, think that it wasn't his fault whatsoever and fully deserved his victory, but there was a lot of inquiry that went on for a little while afterwards. And on that occasion, Juan Antonio Fletcher was second, and he would just love to be the first Spanish rider to land one of the early spring classics.
Well, he really does love these races. He enjoys the atmosphere and the excitement of the races in the northern part of France and the chaos of getting out onto the cobblestones. At the back of the race, this is Stegemans, obviously missed a bottle for his teammate Tom Bowden, and as we look there at Wilfred Peters doing the job of team manager, he will be making sure that he gives him a good few words of advice. I'm sure Tom Bowden would like to get the win, but I have a feeling, having talked to him yesterday, Phil, he's actually trying to concentrate on specific goals in the season instead of trying to win every bike race that he participates in, as he used to when he was a little bit younger.
I think he's riding with a lot more common sense. I mean, he was such a demonstrative sprinter, but, you know, we were talking to the other sprinter at the start this morning, called Robbie McEwen, who was saying that he's only actually been in at the finale of a race to use his sprint on 4 occasions the whole year, which is very unusual for him. But as he pointed out, sprinters have to get to the finish to use the sprint, and his form hasn't been that good. Although he says in the last few days he's beginning to feel like a professional bike rider again, which means if Robbie says it, watch out today.
Absolutely, he's the kind of rider who will know this course, and I think he will profit from the fact that it's made a little bit easier, that the descent off the cobblestones of Kemmel are very difficult for the lighter riders. We saw Jimmy Casper go down very nastily last year. In fact, he had a lot of stitches. I think around about 60 stitches in his head and face to put him back together. He is up and racing again this year, but I tell you what, he must have had quite a scare when that happened, and as did a lot of other big bike riders.
Oh, well, it was terrible. The ambulances were still trying to clean up the first load of fallers on the descent when the race was round again for its second lap, and they had a lot more. And some of the riders had to simply sit there while the ambulances came back to the race from the hospital because there were so many riders quite badly injured with broken bones at the time. So slight amendment to the course. We'll see how they cope. And we must remember too, last year the weather conditions were absolutely perfect, but the reason for the falling was the vibrations causing the little feeding bottles, the bidon, to jump onto the road, and riders start to hit them or brake to avoid them, and down they went. Well, the peloton not huddled together for warmth, although it's a bit chilly out there today. They are now getting a move on here. 9:31 is the gap now, and I think by the time we get to the Kemmelberg, we might see a counter-track trying to break clear.
You can see different teams moving to the front to get themselves organised. I have noticed a large number of riders, Phil, from Team High Road, very present at the front. Servaes Carnarvon doing a lot of work. George Hincapie was moving up the front a few moments ago to pass out drinks and bottles because somebody must have missed out at the front end of the main field. But they've got such a strong team here in depth, Team High Road, because they don't count, I think, just on Mark Cavendish, who, if it comes down to a big sprint towards the end, I'm sure will show a lot of people a good, clean set of wheels. But riders like Roger Hammond, George Hincapie, Andreas Clear, they're seriously a very talented squad.
Well, they've had a great weekend just behind us now, because George Hincapie, yes, he rode extremely well and finished 5th in the Tour de Flandre, which is a great result, but they also had a win on a stage of the Pays Basque race in Spain with Kim Kirken, the Luxembourg rider, getting victory. The women's Tour de Flandre won by Judith Arndt, another rider on Team High Road, and so they're getting quite a collection now. They are the ex-T-Mobile squad. T-Mobile rather shockingly and surprisingly pulling the plug at the end of the season, but I think they left the money in the team, which was renamed Team High Road, so as a result of that they've got a very, very strong team.
Yeah, the only bad thing really for Team High Road was in fact Andre Greipel, the man leading the World Cup at the moment. He didn't start this morning due to illness, and I'm sure he suffered a lot after the big defence of his World Cup lead in the Tour of Flanders at the weekend. So they're down to 7 men on the start line here this morning. They didn't have enough time to replace him, unfortunately, but Team La Silence Lotto did, because they replaced a rider who was sick overnight with Nick Gates, who got the call very late last night to get himself down here for a ride in Ghent Wevelgem. And as you said earlier, he's got a ride again tomorrow in the Pinot Cerami, which is a very different kind of race in the Wallonie and a very hilly race.
Very hard race indeed, yeah. Just seen off to the right there was Beppu Fumiyuki, who used to ride with Lance Armstrong's team, now riding with Skill Shimano. This is when it gets a little bit dangerous. The peloton's packing out and the riders shooting onto the side roads. Where they're riding left and right are actually the cycle paths. And here in Belgium, you're not allowed to ride on the road if there is a cycle path. You must ride on the cycle path. So if you ever come here and go training, that's where you go, on the cycle paths. Hand in the air there for Matt Heyman, another Australian Commonwealth Games road race champion. And I think he's got what they call a lekker band, a flat tyre.
Yep, he's getting off the bike there, not panicking at all. It's a rear flat tyre, and as you see, he stands at the side of the road, nice and calm, doesn't want to panic the mechanic, holds his machine in an ideal position for the mechanic to change the wheel. The wheel is in, the quick release is tightened up, and you're away in well inside of 15 seconds there. That was a nice, smooth, professional change.
No panic, team car still going by, so you're allowed to nip into the slipstreams as long as your progress is forward and you don't just sit there in the slipstreams. The judges won't do anything about that. 9 minutes 22, still continuing to descend in an orderly fashion. There's quite a separate club run now on the right-hand side of our picture here. It's the problem is getting off this situation. You've got to get back into the pack at some stage, otherwise you might finish up turning left and going a different direction altogether. There we are.
Well, that's a little bit precarious the way that happened, but it actually happened very smoothly. You can see the same thing happening over on the left-hand side now. Just looking at the faces of the riders, they are now starting to get very concentrated. They're starting to get nervous because they know once they get out of Poperange, they start to move up to the town of Westouter, and at Westouter they'll find one of the early rolling hills. There's Stuart O'Grady over on the right-hand side there in the white jersey of Team CSC. While at the back of the pack here, this is the son of the owner of the team, Marco Corti, the son of Claudio Corti. He had a tough baptism of fire, Phil, at the weekend in the Ronde van Vlaanderen because he was suffering on a number of occasions.
Well, if Dad's in the car, and I can't see if he is at the moment, he was a former amateur world champion. And he will want to see his son get back into the action pretty quickly. There's a sharp left-hander. Car parked in an extremely narrow position there. And one or two riders had to have skimmed that car. Thank heavens they didn't clip it and fall, but not the safest of places to leave a parked car.
Well, the rider's now moving away from Renninghouse, but if you take a quick look at the clock on the top right-hand side, 9 minutes and 13 seconds, just while we've been talking for a few minutes here, the lone leader, Capelli, has lost himself for almost a minute.
Yeah.
So you can get an indication of just how quickly the main field is riding. It doesn't look as if they've got the organised chase on, but the general impetus has picked up in this peloton here, and they'll be probably riding along here at around about 44 kilometers an hour. Once they start to approach the hills, they'll take that up to 47 or 48 kilometers an hour, while I expect Capelli in the lead will only be able to hold on to an average speed of around about 40, which means they can wipe away 6 or 7 kilometers in 1 hour of racing.
76 kilometers to go, and still plenty of time to put matters to rights. One thing's for sure, though, they're going to have to keep the tempo high. They're going to have to force a group away, either the first or the second time, leaving it a bit late on the second time, I would think. Before we get to the Kemmelberg, where we'll see a huge crowd as always. We're way out in the country at the moment, where the race only goes once, but shortly we go on to the circuit, where they'll do 2 laps before they turn back for home in Wevelgem. Wevelgem, by the way, is a long linear approach, a little bit like Paris Tours, really, isn't it, Paul?
It's a
long straight road.
A long straight road. Once you go through the small town of Menen, which is about 5 kilometers to go, there's a lot of twists and turns. But then finally, as you straighten up for the finish line here in Wevelgem, which all of these riders know, it's a long straight finish of around about 3 kilometers. Matty Heyman, a quick change there. You see no panic at all, riding his way back into the main field, using the team cars professionally, and not over abusing the slipstreaming effect that he can do in the team cars and the convoy behind. But I'm amazed how quickly, Phil, this man came back from that accident we saw him have in the Tour Down Under early on in the year, because he broke his collarbone. And about 2 weeks later, he was racing in the Amgen Tour of California.
He was. I don't think he ever stopped riding. He just had it all pinned up there. We saw the Milram team up alongside with the back door opening, and the reason was they've now got a job on their hands back behind the race. A Milram rider coming back. He'll have to get back as well.
Well, this is the small town here of Westouter, and this is actually a little cobblestone section. He'll turn left here and start what I call really the first climb of the day. The climb of, in the old days, we used to call it the Zwarteberg, or the Black Mountain. But this side, the Flemish tend to call it the Verdijenberg. Once you get to the top of this climb, if you take a right-hand turn in about 400 meters, you're actually in France. But this guy's going to turn left and stay in the mountains of Flanders.
Unless he makes a mistake, of course. 9 minutes, so he continues to come down quite alarmingly just now. There's the Verdijenberg, 940 meters in length, and about 10% gradient, or 1 in 10 as they go up. So now the race, as far as the race behind, begins as they start now to hunt down this man. Keep an eye on the time. Note it was 9 minutes as we started onto the first climbs of the day. 75 kilometers to go. The vast majority spent on the circuits here now in this part of Flanders. As Paul says, we're right on the side of France now, and many of the Belgian riders here will train into France. And although the countries are literally shoulder to shoulder, the terrain and the roads are so vastly different. Over the years they've developed in different directions.
Just over there to the left, you can see where this rider's going. That's the Mont Rouge, or the Red Mountain, and this is a part of the circuit the riders will cover on 2 occasions. This is the Verdijenberg. They'll go over here to the Rodeberg, or the Red Mountain, down to the Monteberg, and then they'll make this new approach to the Kemmelberg with the safer descent that the riders will get to handle this time.
What are we now? 8:44. It's coming down rather quickly now as all the teammates are sent to the front to lift up the pace. It looks like George Hincap is he a teammate? Is he racing to train, or is he racing to win today? Former winner is the rider on the right in the white.
Well, Hincapie, I think, will take the opportunity if it comes. There's Philippe Gilbert sitting at the back end of the main field. He really has reached a certain amount of maturity, I think, this season, been very dominant. That was an incredible win he had in the early part of the year in the Heck Vault race, and not necessarily the best place to stand there in the middle of the road, because if anybody takes a wrong direction or a wrong line, you could find yourself coming face to face with a cyclist, literally.
Well, to give you some idea of how well Philippe Gilbert has started the season, he's had 5 victories this year already, whereas last year the whole year was just 1 win. That was a stage in the Tour de Limousin in the centre of France there. The year before he had 7 wins, which also included Wevelgem, so maybe he's going to even better his 2006 season. But he's certainly on form, and he's very, very confident, and that's the big secret of success, I think. 3rd in Milan-San Remo, let's not forget that.
Well, Kop van der Weestrijd, I think you mentioned around about a minute and a half ago to keep a close eye on the time clock there. It's now down to 8.5 minutes. I can see here that Hermano Capelli is suffering with these climbs, and he's probably got in the back of his mind the fact that he's got 4 climbs each circuit to do, and that means he's got 7 more climbs after this climb, and I think by the time he gets to the top, his time gap is going to be around about the 8 minutes and 15 seconds. So you can see he is losing huge chunks of time, but he's made the effort. He hasn't ridden Ghent Wevelgem in anonymity. At least we will now know that Hermano Capelli was in this bike race, and we saw him at the front of the race for quite a long time.
He's done very, very well, and why not go and stick your nose out front, get some valuable kilometres in those legs at the same time? Well, the roads are all closed. A little bit of a problem at the back here, because this is Tim Goodsell, the new rider on the block from New Zealand, riding for FDJ. Looks like he's picked up a snakebite puncture as well.
Yep, he looks like it was a rear tyre. The best thing to do if you have a puncture like that or a flat tyre is to wait until the team car is right up behind you, because that's the way you get the quickest time change. Goodsell let 2 cars go by him, but I think he shouldn't have too much to panic about, because the hammer is not fully down here at the moment. We're just circumnavigating, and strangely enough, if you look over to the left-hand side, that's where the riders are going to be going in around about 5 kilometers time. They're going along the valley here into the town of Westouter, then they'll turn left, and right in the front there, that in fact is France, where the riders will veer away from.
Just watching down this lovely avenue too. I was just thinking there, Paul, the Kemmelberg, and if you ever get to visit the Kemmelberg, there's plenty of signs on the top to explain the history of the mountain. It's a very odd mountain. It's in the middle of nowhere, really. Been a crash here.
Oh, well, that was just one of those things. It's right at the back end of the main field.
That's Alexander Blanc is the Cofford. He's got the pleasure of wearing number 41, who's got the problem with his bike.
There's a good Belgian supporter there at the side of the road trying to help him out.
It wouldn't be a Belgian if we didn't have a cigar-smoking Belgian help out on the cycle race.
Roy Curvers of Skill Shimano, that was one of those nasty little crashes that went down. A little bit of inattention, everybody just trying to get themselves to the front before the start of the climb at Westouter. And in fact, there you can see the delay, and I wonder if that's Timothy Goodsell there just going through from FDJ. He's just changed the wheel and he got caught out, but I think theoretically he should get himself back into this race, but it looks to me as if this guy's broken his derailleur.
Yeah, it's this is how it happened on the left of the road here. Significantly, it was on a straight piece of road. There's the Shimano rider who's still left on the road on the right of the picture, and it is Roy Curvis trying to straighten his bike.
But again, what happened, the reason for that crash was a couple of riders at the front. They put the brakes on because there was a slight narrowing, but somebody made a mistake of not braking quick enough, or they weren't paying enough attention, and boom, there you are on the ground. Back with the leader, he's over the top of the Zwarteberg, and now he's heading up to the Rodeberg. And it wasn't a bad guess, that really, was it? 8:08, it has come down even more.
Yeah. They've lost nothing of the impetus with that crash. But these are dangerous times for the peloton now, because the chase has started. The riders have got to keep a terrific concentration now, because you've got to really trust the rider in front of you doesn't take you down a ditch or a hole in the road. There are plenty of those in Belgium. The edges of the road are the most dangerous places to ride, because they often have little cobbled strips, as is the case here. And if you slip off onto those, before you know it, you're in all sorts of bother. Anyway, no worries for this fellow just now. It's just coming up to 8 minutes. He's lost 2 minutes of his lead now, and he's lost all that in about 10 or 15 kilometres, so they're bringing him back.
It's a huge chunk of time to lose 2 minutes in 10 kilometres, and that's an indication of how serious the main field takes this. There you can see the peloton. They're snaking their way down. They're not quite into Westouter just yet. They'll come into the town square, across the little cobblestone section in the middle of town by the church, take a left-hand turn and then start to climb up the Verdijenberg. But they're not even thinking about the Verdijenberg or the Mont Rouge or even the Monteberg. These guys are now starting to think about the Kemmelberg. And I think there'll be a big battle to get up to the top of the Kemmelfil in the top 10 or 15 places, because although there's a new, safer tarmac descent, it's actually a very narrow descent off the Kemmelberg that they'll be taking. So they'll want to start that descent in the front end of the peloton.
Interesting, the Liquigas boys have got 2 riders up here, and they may be thinking of Pozzato as a likely winner. He was late to leave the start this morning, had to catch up with the race, but he's a man that does well in this region of cycling.
He certainly does, and he likes these kind of races. On the front there is Sergei Ivanov of Team Astana. He's looking very serious. Tom Bonin indicating there to the riders behind him that there's something in the road, and indicating that we're about to... that's the reason Tom Bonin was indicating. You see the road narrowed in there, and he realized that that was a very dangerous moment. His teammate is not too far away from him, Gert Stegemans. I wonder if Gert Stegemans will be given a chance to win, as was Stijn de Volder at the weekend. This is now the heart of the town of Westhouten. You can see these guys are going over this small section of cobblestones at 360 meters. But I have to say, Phil, these are pretty much ornamental cobblestones, unlike the cobblestones of the Tour of Flanders at the weekend and Paris-Roubaix on Sunday.
That's right. It's Wednesday here, midweek in Flanders, and the riders find themselves the same hotel for the whole week of racing. Some, but not anybody in contention for Paris-Roubaix, will go to the Pinot Cerami tomorrow, which is down towards the German side of the country, which is in the Flemish Ardennes and also on the Dutch side. But they will not be going down to Paris-Roubaix as well, so they'll be taking a rest tomorrow and probably starting to go and recce the area around northern France.
The Lampre rider in the middle there in the pink and blue is Danilo Napolitano. He's the sprinter on the block, and he's riding at the front end of the field like this, Phil, because he wants to make sure he has a chance of not getting caught out in the splits, because if this race does stay together today, he's got a good chance of winning. And in fact, his teammate Alessandro Ballan was just over to the left-hand side as well, looking very concentrated. You look at the faces of the riders now, they know they're coming to a very important tactical point of this race, a strategic point where you have to keep at the front end of the main field and make sure that you don't get caught out at the back in those nasty little crashes.
That's right, the pressure's on now. You've got to work and work hard not to concede your position. Sergei Ivanov getting a little shoulder bump there in the centre left of our picture as the AG2R team move up as well, all wanting to see the first slopes of the Kemmelberg at the front of the peloton, and that's really the cause of the speed. And you can see how they're thinning out the peloton at the back. Those boys are hanging on in there, while the strong men are in that big lumpy pack at the front.
Yeah, definitely there's been an increase in acceleration, and there's also been an increase in the gradient here. It's not a very steep climb, it's just inside of 6% the average grade, but it's where it happens to be in the course that makes it just that little bit more difficult. And there's no respite over the top, because once you turn left, another problem here at the side, but this is a flat tyre. And the flat tyre here will go...
teammates too.
Yeah, that's Marco Marcato. And he's obviously a fancied rider by his team, because they've in fact stopped at the side of the road to pass him up a wheel, and that was Raymond Smith of South Africa who stopped to help him out there.
He'll get back in the race. It was a nice gesture, I must say. So he'll get back into the race. I'm not so sure about the other rider though, Raymond Smith, left behind on the roadside. You say he's South African?
Well, the flag came up as South African. He's got an English name, but it doesn't say on the race book. It was just the graphic that gave away that he's a South African rider. He very well could be. This is the steep part of the climb here, 9.7% as we get up towards the top there.
Project for the week, I think. I mean, I thought I knew South African cycling, but I've never heard of Raymond Smith.
Well, I'll leave it up to you to
I'll check it out.
Do a little bit of a check on that one.
You got it. Something to do between now and the start of Paris-Roubaix. Now, these are the little climbs now, good tempo riding on the front. And there's another bit of bother there, and that was on the Case de Pan riders who just stopped by the roadside as well. Interestingly enough, they're getting an awful lot of puncture victims here. That rider was Jose Gutierrez.
Well, there's been a lot of rain in the area, Phil, and it could be the fact that we've had so much rain recently that it's provoked a lot of small stones to come out onto the race route. Although it's dry now, it has been wet for a few days.
A lot of the problems here, because as you can see, the roads, as far as dirt goes, are in very good condition, but there are the problems of snake bite punctures here. That's when riders do so much jumping across the gaps on the pavement that they snap the wheel, a tyre against the back of the rim of the bicycle, and you get these two little perforations which let the tyre go down, and we call them snake bite punctures. And there's a lot of those, I think, which aren't caused by what's on the outside of the tyre, more or less by what's on the inside due to the impact. But we're looking at the field now, still living at the front and living dangerously are the strong men. Hot favourite today, Mark Cavendish, the youngster who's come into, I think it's his first attempt to Ghent Wevelgem. And he's gone out with 4 stars in some of the local papers here. Local to Belgium, but national papers. who have tipped him as the real favourite to win. That's terrific for him.
Well, that is a reference, because you have to say the journalists for the Belgian papers certainly are aficionados in the sport, and they know exactly how the sport is operating. They know exactly who is riding well. There you can see the little windmill up to the top right-hand side. In the days gone by, the race actually used to turn right and go around the windmill and then come back onto the main road. But it's just a little bit of a prolongation of the agony, I think, and ever since then the organisation have decided just to take them straight on, nice and smooth. Thank you very much.
Well, they're making short work of these hills. I think they're staying in the big chain wheels as they go up this climb as well, which I've been up this climb. It's not one for the big chain wheel for me, that's for sure. But these boys are flying up it right now and keeping the gears rolling nicely. All the teammates dancing on those pedals, trying to keep the field strung out behind. Even though they're all in a big pack, it is not the case of them finding it easy. They're having to fight for the positions. And Tom Bonen, as he did for Paul in the Tour of Flanders, right at the front there, dead centre of picture.
In the white jersey there with the World Championship bands on his sleeves, he's riding very confidently these last few days. Laszlo Bodrogi's the rider on the front there for Team Crédit Agricole. He's obviously thinking about his man for the day, Thor Hushovd. Behind Bodrogi there, I just caught a glimpse, of course, of Stuart O'Grady. And there's the Belgian national champion, Stijn de Volder. The champion now, of course, of the Ronde van Vlaanderen as well, and he was absolutely blown away, Phil, by that performance. He couldn't believe it. He said, this has been a childhood dream to me, and he still hasn't quite realised the performance that he's put in. I think it'll take him a couple of days for that to sink in.
It will. He'll be floating on air right now, as they say. He'll be riding that peloton thinking, I won the Tour de Flanders. He's not going to worry over much today about winning Ghent Wevelgem. He'd like to probably do well again on Sunday. We'll see. Now the roads have gone from those lovely wide boulevards now as we're in the Bergs, as we get back to the leader.
Now this is the change in the route. We've just come through the town of Loka. We started the Monteberg, and this little climb is, in fact, this little corner is just halfway up the Monteberg, so they've turned to the right. They're going to circumnavigate around the Heuvelland and come in to the town of Kemmel and then attack the Kemmel from a different side. There's another crash there at the back.
And the irony is, it's the leader of the Sonia Duval team who's gone down there, Paul. This should be Raoul Alathon.
Yeah, he went down pretty hard. You see, you've got to be so attentive in the races like Ghent Wevelgem, Tour of Flanders, Paris-Roubaix, and again his chain is off there, but the team manager's just come up alongside him, and that's a little bit of an unfortunate place to have an accident. You see all the team cars have actually stopped behind there. They heard immediately of the accident, and they figured it was a little bit dangerous. So Bodrogi's on the front, and not too far away, just a little bit further back, we've got Kurt Adler-Arve. So let's just have a look here and see where the accident happened. It was right at the back end of the main field. You see riders taking risks, and he was riding on the pavement there, trying to move himself up because he knows how important the next climb of the day is going to be, the Monteberg, and he ended up on the ditch and at the side of the road.
You must feel a bit silly when you fall off doing that, really.
You certainly do. A bit sore
especially
as well.
As you come up onto the pavement to try and cheat your way around the corner.
It's the nervousness, you know, you don't think about it, you take risks, you want to get to the front end of the main field, and it doesn't really matter any which way you want to. Yeah. And that's what happened there, and I don't know if we have been looking at the clock for a while, but look at that now, it's down to 6.5 minutes. It's coming down pretty fast.
They are going much quicker than the leader right now, and of course he's going to get to the Kemmelberg first. He's going to be first over the top on this time, so we get plenty of support up there. There's a big coffee shop on top of the Kemmelberg, and it has television, and it must be the most popular place in Belgium on the Ghent Wevelgem day, because many people go up to the Kemmelberg by bike, watch the race go through twice, and then run inside and see the end in Wevelgem on television, because you can't get back to the finish in time from the top of the Kemmelberg. Here we go as they tap out the tempo here right now, and a lot of anxious riders now are going to keep this pressure on for as long as they can to hold position. Hincapie riding brilliantly, second left of our picture.
Well, there's a lot of big names moving to the front. I just saw Fabian Cancellara not too far away from the front end of the main field. He was looking very serious and concentrated, as was Pippo Pozzato. Here's one of the memorial cemeteries down here. Most of these cemeteries are dating back to the Great War, the First World War, 1914, 1918, and they're still very much tended in this part of the world. There were a lot of battles here around Ypres, around the Kemmelberg. A lot of men ended up losing their lives just for 100 meters of gain on some occasions.
Yes, terrible days gone by, thank heavens. As we go back to the peloton, Astana of Johan Bruneel here, denied a start in this year's Tour de France. It'll take them a while to get over that. Nico Eekhout to the right of our picture, forcing his way in for the top sport team. Eekhout himself has had something like 70 victories in his career, which began in 1993. But His best position het vault was 4th in 2005.
Well, here we've got the standard turn here, Phil, to the left-hand side. And this is in the town of Lokeren. This is where they've normally, habitually, always started the climb of the Monteberg. And that's a little bit precarious there. You see again riders taking the risks. Those nasty little bollards in the middle of the pavement to stop cars parking on the corner there, but they're not very much suited for bicycle riders trying to take a shortcut.
They're also designed to knock cyclists off in Ghent, Wevelgem, I think. But they failed on this occasion. We all got safely round there, as we're seeing riders sitting at the back here now.
Well, that was Philippe Gilbert sitting at the back, so that's a bit of a surprise. Now there's a problem here as well for the Bouygues Telecom riders, and it looks like Erkki Putsep was the rider who had a problem there. He's being looked after by his teammate Labe, and the reason they've stopped there, Phil, I think is because Putsep is a very rapid sprinter, so they're passing across the wheel.
Well, good for Labe. He's now going to try and get it back in the race, because it's not so easy anymore. Those cars getting a bit disjointed behind now, as the riders racing onto narrower roads, and that was why Tom Bonan came up here, to keep out of trouble, because he knew the course was altered.
Roger Hammond there at the front for Team High Road, thinking about his teammate and countryman, and that would be Mark Cavendish. Hammond was second in this race last year. He loves racing in Belgium. He rode a very good Ronde van Vlaanderen at the weekend, but I have to say, Phil, this is a very solid Team High Road for these classic seasons, and that may well give the advantage to George Hincapie when he comes to race on Sunday, because in the past he's always found himself just a little bit isolated in the final 40-50 kilometres of the big one-day classics.
Yes, and if he only had a little bit of extra help in years gone by, he would have won that race for sure. Hammond there tucked in behind and sitting on the shoulder of big Tom Bonan. They're like David and Goliath, I reckon. Hammond has been a man of Belgium for a long time now, former world cyclocross champion, Roger, but he is a fluent Flemish speaker here now. He's very, very popular. The Belgians appreciate the effort he's made to learn the language, and so he's very much at home on these roads.
He certainly is, but I have to say, Tom Bonan is looking very dominant here. He's showing his cards a little bit too early, I have to say, though, Phil. He showed us in the Ronde van Vlaanderen at the weekend that he had great form. There's George Hincapie in the dark glasses, and, of course, Mr. Eric Zabel. I think we can call him Mr. Eric Zabel nowadays.
Sir Eric.
Yes, Lord Eric Zabel. The man who's at the front on the right-hand side there loves this race, and created a little bit of a giggle for us. Unfortunately, he was unhurt when a couple of years ago that horse jumped out of the field on the run in towards Wevelgem, took him out and took out half of the peloton as well. And the owner of the horse actually sought out Eric Zabel a couple of days later and went up to him to apologise.
That's right. It was owned by, if I remember rightly, an 11-year-old. It was a horse that got out of the paddock, and in fact Eric very kindly sent her a racing strip and accepted her apologies without a problem. And so Eric, by the way, it depends on whose record you have, but my records have him down for 203 wins since he started in 1992.
Yes, I was looking at that this morning actually, and one of the other records that said it was 192, but I think we'll stick with ours, because there are one or two races that I feel that Eric has won that may not have been counted in some official statistics. But as an ex-professional bike rider myself, Phil, I have to say, a win is a win.
Absolutely. I mean, is it UCI ranked? Is it a Pro Tour? Is it a national event? You've got to draw the line. A win is a win as far as I am concerned. And of course, Eric does win a lot of races within Germany, which are not generally open to all of the other riders either. But his record speaks for himself. Now, this new stretch of road here is rather narrow, Paul, as they all are basically in this area. And so this is now going to make it much more difficult for the riders, and the strong men have got to the front. Look how far behind you are if you're at the back now.
Yeah, they've all been out and had a look at this course. This is an area, by the way, of Belgium called the Heuvelland, and there are a lot of cycle tours around here, and you've got a very good chance of having a nice afternoon out there. Great to ride, but not great to ride if you're in a big pack like this, because somebody just about lost it going around that corner as well from Team Cofidis. And I think it's because of this narrow section and this narrow approach to the Kemmelberg that a lot of riders, Phil, have actually, and big riders, have moved themselves to the front end of the main field. As we look here at Tom Steels sitting at the back end of the pack. In the past, he's been a winner of this great bike race. There is the Kemmelberg over to the left-hand side. That's where the riders will be going shortly.
Well, Tom Steels normally in his heyday would never have been last man around that corner on a difficult stretch of road like that. He's been 4 times the national champion of Belgium. He's won nearly 80 races, and this year he's riding out his final season, and he's probably going to stop midway, as they so often do.
Yep. Well, you never know. They're all thinking about the the race at the weekend, the one from last weekend, the Ronde van Vlaanderen, and the one for next weekend, the Great Paris-Roubaix. It's a strange race, saddling the 2 weekends, bridging the 2 weekends, with a lot of riders coming in specifically for Ghent Wevelgem, and those riders are normally the sprinters. Bonen happily sitting in the front end of the pack there, nice and comfortably, making sure that he's not going to get involved in any of the contretemps that may happen on the run into the Kemmelberg in a few moments' time. In fact, I just saw that rider again, Reynolds Smith, Phil, from South Africa, we think, coming back into the main field. So next time we see the back end of the pack, maybe you
see him going out again.
Maybe you could check it out and see if you recognise him.
Because we'll be getting onto the Kemmelberg and he won't have recovered. Just look how narrow this is here, and see the time now has come down to just on 6 minutes. 61 kilometres, about 38.5 miles to go to the finish as the riders now, and they've even expected a huge crowd here by the look of it, because they've taken the stretch of the road not necessary.
Well, there's Death Valley down the middle, as the riders call it, that little black strip you can see where the 2 pieces of concrete cement road here are stuck together with a kind of tar product. But when it cracks up during the winter months, it leaves a gap just wide enough for a nice front wheel to get stuck into, and I've seen some pretty nasty crashes because of that. So here is the new approach to the Kemmelberg here as we start to move up towards the front. You can see they'll take a right-hand turn onto the Kemmel. In the past it's always been a left-hand turn, but one thing that will not alter, Phil, is the fact that it is from this side still a pretty difficult climb. They'll have to use a sprocket of around about 22 teeth. Now this is the approach and this is the right-hand bend. All of this done for the safety of the riders.
And look at the preparation this year with the barriers like this. This was never like this before. Well, last time I raced around that corner, it was many, many years ago. The riders stopped immediately. I fell off, and somebody on the left of the road, I didn't spot them this time, picked me up. I'd never even had time to release my feet from the cleats. I bodily put back up on the bike and virtually pushed to the top of the Kemmelberg. And I still missed the move.
Well, he must have been quite a strong bloke.
Oh, he was very strong. I should have got his name, shouldn't I? He'd be dead now. It was hundreds of years ago.
Well, this just goes to show how difficult the Kemmelberg is, especially if you've been in the lead like this man for over 100 kilometres. And now the important thing about the cobbles is to try and ride over them fast, because if you ride over them slowly, as this guy is doing here, you can see his bike is actually bouncing almost over every cobbled section of this road.
Incidentally, look at the cars behind. You'll see the letter K in the windscreen, which means Kemmel. Only the cars with that badge in the windscreen are allowed onto this road. And amongst the vehicles not allowed are all the team vehicles. They are being sent in a different direction and will pick up the course at the bottom of the Kemmel. The reasons are obvious, of course. If 1 or 2 of those cars either collide or break down, the whole race is blocked. So they're not allowed up here. It actually doesn't look steep at all on the pictures, does it? That's the unfortunate part of television. It's like when you look at motor racing, you can't get a feeling of 250 miles an hour. But this is a very, very steep climb.
Well, there's an indication. You just caught a quick glimpse of his rear cluster there, the sprockets. He was right over to the left-hand side of his gear ratio, and that's an indication that he really is pushing it. This is the steepest part of the climb, and this is an unrepenting climb as well. It starts off fairly gradually, and then once you get to the top, it's as if somebody's taken a high lift jack and they've pushed it up and up and up, and that's where all of a sudden, if you've got no momentum, the momentum completely and utterly disappears at this point.
I'll tell you one thing, Paul, I hope we've got plenty of tables and chairs in that coffee shop today. There's a big crowd up here.
Well, this looks like a huge crowd. I'm thinking it's because of the weather conditions here this afternoon, because Belgium has not been blessed with the weather over the last week or so, but finally it seems as if maybe springtime has come. Yep. He's up at the top of the climb, off the cobblestones, and now he will take this new left-hand turn down a very narrow country lane to start this circuit once again.
Oh, welcome drink at the right place, right time. Change bottles, souvenir for somebody. He's over the top of the Kemmelberg, and he's actually held his lead up there. He didn't lose hardly any time at all on the climb. And of course, the riders have still got to come and race on that climb. We will now swing away to the left instead of going down the terrible plunge of the cobblestones. And I think this, we'll see now if it's a wise move by the organisation, because there is a very sharp turn at the bottom.
Yeah, but most of the riders know it, Phil. They've tried out this route in the recent 3 days of La Panne, and it's mainly the same riders who come from the 3 days of La Panne to the Tour of Flanders, to Ghent Wevelgem, and then, of course, on to Paris-Roubaix. Here's the swinging descent. It's a fairly narrow descent, as you can see, but at least it's a safe descent. It's a smooth surface, and it's a safe surface.
It could be going down somebody's front drive here. It's so narrow, but there's the turn. Fortunately, it's very dry today. It looks very easy, too, with one rider going down it. 6 minutes, he's lost about 2 or 3 seconds towards the top of the climb. but the narrowness continues here, and the ski netting is there to catch the unwary.
Well, I'm trying to remember this. I've ridden this route in the past. In fact, once you get down to the bottom here, you come out and onto almost exactly the same road as the bottom of the Kemmelberg, and you rejoin that route.
That's it. It came in from the right, and now we're back en route here, as it were, heading down towards the bottom. We've got to do the whole circuit again now, and this rider hanging on to less than 6 minutes, so 60 kilometres left to go. Next time he's in this very position, he'll change direction, bound for Wevelgem, and I think you're going to find he'll have about 2 minutes left.
Yep, he's lost an awful lot there. He's lost 5 minutes of his original advantage when we first came on the air. Here is the town of Kemmel, and the main field are charging through there. Now they're stretched out into a very long line. It's Liquigas on the front. They'll be looking after them, and Pipo Pozzato not too far behind. I can just see the jersey of the Belgian national champion, Stijn de Volder. He will probably, I think, this afternoon be looking a little bit after the position of Tom Bonen, because if Bonen's got good legs here, he would like to come out of this race with a win.
Barlow World, very much a team within the Pro Tour circuit now. They're not a Pro Tour team, but I think that's more or less by choice. They certainly will be in the Tour de France this year now. They're no longer on the fringe of professional cycling. They are very much in it. And Robbie Hunter started today, reported to be last seen last Sunday in the Tour of Flanders, carrying his bike on his shoulder on the first big cobble climb, the Molenberg.
Yes, I don't think he enjoyed the Ronde van Vlaanderen. He said he had a very difficult time keeping healthy, he said, since his good start to the season in South Africa. But for him, he's got his eye on the month of July and the Tour de France, and hoping to renew his acquaintance with victory. He won a stage last year, becoming the first South African ever to win a stage, and he would also like to get a good crack at the green jersey too. He finished second in that competition behind a certain Tom Bonen.
Pozzato up here for Liquigas, and they're protecting not just Pozzato, Paul, but I also think their on-form sprinter Francesco Kiki. He's a rider who could well take this in the sprint today, and they're going to keep him as a real good second piece of ammunition. There's the right-hand turn again. The men that made it first, none other than the champion of Belgium, Stijn de Volder, the winner of the Tour of Flanders. Only 4 guys now have ever won that wearing that jersey, and he's one of them.
Yeah, but check out here,
Oh,
Pipo
dear.
Pozzato. He enjoys the cobbles, and he's seen that, and he's decided, I'm going to dictate this pace to everybody here who is present. It looks like Kurt Adler Arvidsson moving up there as well. He's in fine form at the moment, and he has come up alongside of Pipo Pozzato. This is the best way to handle a climb like this, to get to the front, dictate your own pace if you're feeling comfortable. Pozzato looks very comfortable.
Well, he comes around this sort of bend here, then he'll see the rest of the climb, but he knows the climb, so he knows it's coming. But it is a fearsome sight because it gets steeper as he comes up towards the summit. But even so, this is going to cause a little bit of damage for the rest of the race now as Felipe Pozzato pushes on, and it's Matti Breschel, who's a very good sprinter, who's going with him.
Well, he's looking very comfortable there. A little bit further back is Stijn de Volder. 104 there is the big man himself, Tom Bonen. They've allowed those 2 riders a certain amount of advantage, but I'm not sure if they're going to have a big enough advantage to go too much further off the front end of this main field once we start the descent. But you can see Stijn de Volder there. He's really been put very much on the defensive.
Oh, really caught his legs. Not so much the climbs of the Tour de Flanders, but this is a very different climb here, cobbled, longer and steeper. As the gap tumbles to inside 5.5 minutes at 58 kilometres to go. This is the damage done right down the field now. These guys will feel they are still in touch with the front group, but once over the top and around that new back street that they've discovered, you're going to find there'll be about 50 or 60 boys trying to get away from the front, and it may be these 2 will be well clear because they're about to filter on the descent now as Matti Breschel takes the charge down first.
Well, they've got themselves a 5 or 10 second advantage. There's Stewie O'Grady moving up to the front. He won't do anything at all because he'll be happy with his teammate Matti Breschel making the breakaway move here with Pipo Pozzato. Pozzato is a strong bike rider, but now, Phil, they're facing up to a very long circuit before they start this section of climbs once again.
Well, Breschel, of course, like all the other riders on CSC this year, looking for a new sponsor at the end of the season. CSC, rather surprisingly, I feel, announced the withdrawal from the sport, and yet in the real bigger picture of a company like CSC that can't cost very much to run this team in return for the publicity that they are given.
Yeah, it seems a shame when they're actually on the crest of a wave. They've dominated a lot of the racing in the early part of the season. A great win by Fabian Cancellara in the recent Milano-San Remo, and again the team is really regarded as one of the top teams in the world. I'm sure somebody will come up alongside them and take the team over, because the team infrastructure will not change. They're selling it as a franchise, if you like, and I think what they've got is a very good franchise, and it's definitely a strong team, a team for today and also a team for the next 5 or 6 years.
Absolutely. And Fabian Cancellara flying the flag very proudly for them this year with some great results, starting with his victory in Milan-San Remo in classic style. And it looks like this is the back of the field as we're all the way down, more or less the most dangerous part of the route. And that was Tom Steele still hanging in at the back of the race. So he should get on, but maybe from the helicopter we'll see how the splits are repairing themselves here.
Well, they're in fact still a pretty big main field there. It hasn't done too much damage to Kemmelberg here at the moment, apart from the two guys who managed to ride away off the front. There you can see now the composition with 56 kilometers to go. The second group there with Pozzato and Brescia at 4:29, but they're only looking at around about 15 to 16 seconds lead over the front end of the main field. And I think they realize that, and it looks very much as if they're going to sit up and wait for the peloton to come back.
It's a little bit of a problem now for Pozzato. He's put on a little bit too much of the pedal alert, and he's hurt the field, but he's given himself a disadvantage. Only one rider going with him. Pozzato's off to a great start this year, second in the Milan-San Remo, 6th last week in the Tour de Flanders. He's got the legs, and if this is a training ride, he's just going to give himself a little bit of a hard spell, maybe wait for the race and then see what develops after that.
Well, I don't think he wants to ride to the finish from here. If he'd done that on the final lap here of the Kemmelberg, he may well have insisted with his effort. But I think as an experienced professional bike rider, he will probably sit up and wait for the main field. O'Grady obviously doesn't want to chase him down. He's setting a false tempo on the front there on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
And right in the middle in the orange jersey is Juan Antonio Fletcher. He was the man of this race a couple of years ago, and he has, I have to say, he's been the Spanish rider of the classics over the last few years, and not far away from him is Fabian Cancellara, just sitting in the middle, waiting for what he thinks will be the right moment to make a move.
It's interesting, this, Paul. We often see amateur riders do this team blocking tactic, but not often the pros. Yet we've got the Liquigas boys on the front, Stuart O'Grady for Matty Breschel up the front, and they actually are slowing the race down. It's rather like an old-fashioned move, that one.
Well, it's one out of the handbook, and every now and again you've got to open that handbook and try any old tactic that you think may well survive. There you can see the main field, and they're starting to regroup, and that's an indication that the pressure is not really on at the front end of the peloton. I think they will wait until they get back out into the countryside once again before starting to turn up the screws again. This is the achteraan van de peloton, or should I say the back end of the main field.
Not surprisingly, it's Marcus Lundqvist who's here at the back in CSC, just letting the others take him back up to the group. There's still a significant gap now, some 20 seconds, is it? 18 seconds or so anyway.
Well, 18 and 17 is 35.
That's correct.
I thought you were the accountant in this group.
I used to be. I turned up to cycle commentating, so it was easier.
Those are the two chasers. They're not insisting there. They keep looking over the shoulders. They're waiting for the main field to come around that corner. And there is the peloton. It looks a little bit more than 15 seconds to me, but I do think that those two riders at the front, Pozzato and Breschel, I think they will wait for the main field to come back, because we're still looking at about 54 kilometers to go.
Well, Pozzato's only won one classic race here over the years in this part of the world, which was Het Volk, which virtually opens the European season. And he got that in 2007 in very strong style. He's clearly got strong legs today. He's feeling good. And just shaking out his legs there too is Baden Cook of Team Barlow World. He'd be looking forward to a big sprint. So this might be a good day for Baden. He's in the right place after the first lap.
And I also noticed that Graham Brown wasn't too far away from the front end of the main field either. And maybe we'll be a little bit of a squabble if it comes down to a sprint down towards the end. Will it be Oscar Freire, or will it be Graham Brown as team sprinter for Rabobank?
Graham needs the money, Paul, because his wife Hayley is going to give birth to their first child in July this year. Hayley herself, former national champion of criteriums for Australia. And so he's going to race for two today, I reckon, Graham. And he has got a good form. So maybe it will be his sprint. It's like Philippe Gilbert looking under his arm.
Well, he's seen that as a move. He's seen the little bit of lethargy in the main field. Puts in the little earpiece from his race radio to see whether or not there's going to be any reaction. He's trying to ride across here a 15-second gap. Now, if he gets across the gap and joins those two, we're then looking at a rather serious trio.
Well, immediately teammates of Gilbert's got near the front, and they've also offered no reaction, so the peloton backing off. Gilbert might well now. If Gilbert reaches the two front runners, that is a very different race composition. Gilbert's a very strong rider. Breschel's a very strong rider. Had an excellent Tour of Ireland last year, and also Pazzato. So those three boys are serious winners of this event elect. So the peloton better watch out here.
Well, he's got about a 15-second gap to get himself across. It didn't really look as if Pippo Pozzato and Breccia were riding all that hard. And when they hear over race radio that there's a possibility of reinforcements, and reinforcements in the shape of Philippe Gilbert coming alongside, they may well just sit up and wait for him and then start to form a serious allegiance, because three pairs of legs now have all of a sudden got a chance of surviving.
Breschel last year had a very good season. I say he was always up in the sprints in the Tour of Ireland. New race back on the calendar there, but he finished third overall, winning a stage of his home tour, the Tour of Denmark, where he also won the points prize there as the best sprinter. He won the second stage of the Tour of Ireland, I think it was, as well. So he has a sprint if he can use it, but look at the gap here that Philippe Gilbert has opened up. He's a rider we never think as being a Belgian rider, but he's very much a Belgian rider. He comes from the Ardennes, which is the French-speaking Walloon area. So he's racing very often at home ground. Paul, when I used to live in Belgium and I raced with the Flemish boys, we used to go and race in the Walloon area. And you're in the same country, and yet the boys couldn't speak to their own fellow natives because they didn't speak French.
Well, it's very strange, the country here. In fact, there's a river goes right up the middle called the River Schelde, or the Lescaut. And in a number of parts of the country, it's in fact known as the linguistic border. And you can have people living on one side of the river cannot speak French at all, and people on the other side cannot speak Flemish at all. And it's been an area where there have been great battles on a Saturday night, because the language difference here has been a serious problem, although in recent years it seems to have disappeared a lot. But Philippe Gilbert here, he actually bridges the two, because he speaks very good Flemish, he speaks very good French, of course, from the Walloon area, and he actually speaks pretty good English too.
And he's looking very, very good now, and this is a good example of just how strong he is this year. 5 wins already for Philippe Gilbert, and beginning to move up towards the two leaders, and the peloton have unleashed him just for the moment at least.
Well, it's a good move, and I think those two riders in front, they've got a chance to look over the shoulders and see him, and they will know that this strong man is coming across here, and he's eating into that advantage, and I think very shortly he will rejoin them at the front, and the gap in fact now still looking rather serious, because between those two leaders and Philippe Gilbert we're looking at around about 35 to 40 seconds, so it is starting to stretch out. Now that is a good gap they've got before they drop down into the town of Westhouten and start the succession of climbs once again.
For me, this is a very, very interesting move here, which could consolidate on the next lap around on the cobblestones. Maybe a group will reach them, maybe not. As Gilbert is going to keep maximum effort just on the edge of the red zone to reach those two riders quickly. So he needs a little bit of time to recover before he starts the climb of the Kemmelberg itself. These two boys, I think, will need the presence of Gilbert. So if they get word he's coming, they might back off just a little bit. Meanwhile, the man we have not forgotten about, and he's doing a great ride, Armano Capelli, is back into Westhouten, about to thread his way up to the Kemmel again. 3:58, but that's the chasers, don't forget. The peloton is at 4:47.
Yes, he's actually not lost too much time on the main field, and that's an indication since they've gone over the Kemmel, they've backed off a fraction. They normally will do that after they've been through some seriously difficult parts of the course, because they know that they're going to have to rack up the speed once again once they get back down towards the approach of the Verdaienberg, the Monteberg, and of course the Kemmelberg for the last time. Gilbert, it's always very difficult when you try to jump across a gap like this, because your first enthusiastic attack gets you probably 2/3 of the way across the gap. Then all of a sudden, you've got to keep that effort going, and it seems to stabilize out for a while. He'll suffer here at around about 100 meters for a few more moments, and then all of a sudden he'll slowly creep into that last 50 meters. And when he gets to 50 meters, they'll probably look over their shoulders, they'll see him and say, well, he's a good strong lad to have with us, we'll let him get back on.
He gave every indication. They've seen him coming, they'll ease up and let him on. There's no point trying to hold him off. They need his legs. And so he's going to come up very shortly. He gave us every indication of what sort of season he was going to have this year when we met him in Australia in January. He won the King of the Mountains competition in the Tour Down Under. He finished 11th overall, but he was always on the attack. And sure enough, less than a month later, He was over in Mallorca. He was nearly over on his backside there because he nearly overshot that bend, and he won the overall and 2 rounds of that Challenge Mallorca.
Yeah. Well, in fact, he lost his bottle here. Look, as he was going round the corner, he didn't quite get the bottle and he lost it. And if he'd clipped that, that could have been a nasty accident.
Riding over a bidon, I've known some terrible, terrible crashes. And let's thank heaven that didn't slide under his back wheel. It would have been a nasty fall. Now, it's a little bit disruptive to his pace, maybe.
In fact, I flew up from Australia, sitting next to him on the plane, and I loaned him a couple of our magazines, the Cycle Sport magazine. And
Did you charge him?
No, I actually loaned them to him for fun, and he really enjoyed them and thought they were a very good, well-finished product. And I did make sure that he realised they were boomerang magazines because he had to give them back at the end of the event, at the event of the flight.
He's going to the right country. Well, he became of age. He got his 21st victory late last month in March, or back into April, of course, now in Fête Le Franc. Is that in France or Belgium?
It's just on the border. In fact, it is just inside of the French-speaking part of the country, and it's over towards the east of the area around Mons. It's a very difficult race as well, Fête Le Franc.
Which is why I won it, because he specialises in those sort of races.
Well, I think he's a very interesting bike rider, because a rider from the Walloon area, normally those riders are usually dubbed as being climbers, but he's got the ability to ride well in the cobble classics. We saw him, of course, win Het Volk, but he also climbs fairly well. He would probably, if I had to put a name, he's a great sprinter, yeah. But I'd have to put, apart from the sprint that he's got, which is much superior to that of Claude Criquelion, I'd have to say he was a similar kind of rider to Claude Criquelion, who was one of the greatest Flemish-speaking, the greatest Walloon riders of Belgian history in recent times.
Criquelion, I remember asking who he was, but now we always call him Crick the Lion, which is what he's called by his supporters when he was racing. Former champion of Belgium and winner of Liège-Bastogne-Liège. And Crick no longer with us. He was involved in that very controversial finish when Steve Bow was accused of causing him to crash in the World Championships, which was given to the rider who didn't fall, which was Maurizio Fondriest.
Yes, I don't think Maurizio Fondriest complained too much about the result, although Claude Criquelion did try to take Steve Bow to court, and it was a long, drawn-out affair. But I watched that replay a number of times, and I have to say I still to this day think that Criquelion was the one who made the mistake of trying to go up through a gap that actually wasn't there.
Exactly, and he suddenly found they built barriers just ahead of him, and that was the end of that. Yeah.
And there was the larger policeman as well standing in the way.
Indeed.
Which was a hazard. These two guys, Phil, are actually not allowing Philippe Gilbert to come back that easily. They've got themselves a fairly decent rhythm going here, and just behind them, Gilbert is actually locked in at around about 10 seconds. I think he should make the contact here on the Verdaienberg, or the Mont Noir, the Black Mountain. But as you can see, they certainly are not sitting down and waiting for him to make the contact.
Well, Pozzato, a real man for the seasons, and this is his favourite time of year. He slips away after about July. We don't hear too much about him after that, but certainly rides well. He comes out fighting, and well, Breschel also is now very much a developing rider here. Yet another gun for Team CSC. Gilbert will get up there, believe me, and once we get onto these slopes, we're just about to start one right now, the Verdaienberg, then I think he'll close quite rapidly because the terrain will suit him best.
Well, you can see he's closing it down a few meters at a time there, and very shortly, before we get to the steepest part of the climb, which is around about 7.5%, he will make contact, and he'll be able to get a little bit of a breather once we turn to the left over the top. And then very shortly after that, he will start to put some serious energy into the success of this breakaway, because if you have a quick look at the gap there, as Gilbert joins the two chasers, Phil, we are now looking at 1 minute and 20 seconds back to the peloton. This is now looking like a rather serious move.
I'd be very concerned about this, because there are 3 big teams nominated now, and we've seen teammates at the front offering no chase, of course, at all. And with somebody like Pozzato on the move, this could be curtains for the rest of the race. It all depends how much they've got when they go over the top of the Kemmelberg, I think. It is a long, flat, twisting road before they get onto the main highway. I think it's the N8 that brings us right down into town for the finish. Breschel now looking over his shoulder. Got to be impressed with that chase by Philippe Gilbert for sure.
Well, so much for me saying it didn't look like those two riders were going to insist on their acceleration, because they certainly have. If you look at the main field now looking a good 120 in arrears, and with the reinforcements coming here from Philippe Gilbert, this is now looking like a pretty serious 3-man chasing group. They're 3 minutes and 14 seconds behind the lone leader, and still there is no serious reaction from the front end of the main field. And now, as you've said earlier on, Phil, we're looking at some rather older, younger tactics from the amateur days, where you've got on the right-hand side the Française de Jeu backing off, trying to slow down the race. Pipo Pozzato's teammates in there for Liquigas also setting a false tempo on the front end of the main field, and that's why these guys are getting that advantage. We're now looking at 1:20 between the 3 riders here and the front end of the main field.
A little bit of a quandary for the boys back there now. They're going to pin all the hopes on getting their strong men up to the front and off the front on the Kemmelberg, because that's the best chance they've got left. These 3 have made the move. Gilbert is an aggressive bike rider, and he's joined the leaders there. Stein de Volder has got himself back to the other end of the field. Flescher is up here. A nice, calm, serene look on the face of Stuart O'Grady, because Breschel is up front. Breschel, by the way, is only 23 years of age, so he's still a huge talent coming through. And yet he's been a pro. This is his 4th season. It's amazing.
It really is. That's Christophe Mangin over on the right-hand side. There's a little move coming here. This looks like Vicente Garcia Acosta.
Who else
going
would
off
it be?
the front end of the main field. Not a man for the classics, or a man for the Giro, the Tour de France, and of course the Vuelta a España, but certainly a man who's quite prepared to have a go.
Well, this is a typical move by him. He's the big boy of the game, and he's won 1 stage of the Tour de France. He must have tried to win hundreds, but he finally got one a couple of years ago.
Well, it was a good one. It was on Bastille Day, and he beat 2 Frenchmen.
You can't go better than that, I guess.
One of which was the brother of Laurent Jalabert, Nicolas Jalabert. There's still, I think, in fact, the way the main field is riding here, Phil, it doesn't bode too well for the men at the front trying to win this race in that small group of 3, because we've got a lot of strong teams who are still very solid and have got themselves a chance to get organised after we go over to Kemmel on the last time, and especially teams, of course, like Team Quick-Step. I also noticed quite nicely to see that Stefan Weissermann was riding up at the front end of the main field. Weissermann rides for Team Cycle Kohlstrop. Although it's a small team, it has been selected to ride in Paris-Roubaix, a race that he really does enjoy.
Well, the organisers of the Tour de France also organise Paris-Roubaix, and they've become totally autonomous now, turn their backs on the UCI. They're doing it all themselves. Whatever they want to do is the way it is, and they're choosing what riders they want to take part in their events at the moment. And not is it making a happy relationship between the world body and the organisers of the Tour. But we've got 3 very big riders here now. 46 kilometres to go. We've still got the mountain in between. There's every chance they can pick up the leader as a threesome.
Well, they've got him at around about the 3-minute mark, and I think next time that young rider at the front, Emmanuel Capelli, gets to the Kemmelberg, his legs are going to be screaming out for a little bit of surrender. A little bit of discontent here,
yes,
as Gilbert. The reason here is Gilbert does need a fraction of a breather, and Pipo Pozzato taking on board the little bit of the Italian approach here, and he wants him to start riding straight away, instead of giving him a couple of kilometres just to get his breath back, because he had to make a very hard effort to get across that gap. And here is the next man on the road, and it is our good old friend Jose Vicente Garcia Acosta.
And he's about to top the little mountain here before we head to the Kemmelberg. Keep going. He's won 2 stages of the Vuelta. He's won a stage of the Tour de France. He's only had 9 wins. He's been a pro forever, since 1995, but a tremendously popular bike rider.
And I haven't seen, I don't think, Phil, such a large main field in Ghent Wevelgem at this stage, and that's probably because of the fact that the ascent over to Kemmel has been that little bit easier. It's been made that little bit safer, and very often what has happened in the Kemmelberg descent is it's the descent that's actually split up the race more than the actual climb.
Yeah, so maybe that the new route is proving a little bit too easy, but we'll see. Garcia Acosta not committed to this. He keeps looking over at how the chase is coming up behind, so
he's a sensible rider. He's been a professional for quite a number of years. You know, he turned professional way back in 1995, and he knows in a race like this, you don't try and ride across a gap like that on your own. You will try and ride across it with 2 or 3 other riders in the group with you. So he's decided, as his attack there caught everybody by surprise and didn't drag 3 or 4 riders clear, he'll wait for the main field and the cavalry.
Is that the restaurant on the right, Paul, we used to go for our chips?
That is the place there, the Zanakin it was called. It was a very nice place. We certainly haven't. We don't get a chance to go out and enjoy these races very much anymore. It's straight from the start to the finish and get commentating as quickly as possible.
Because television these days covers almost every wheel stroke. But look at the size of this peloton here. Hasn't thinned out really at all. Probably about 50, 60 riders are behind the race at some point. as we now race towards the turn towards the Kemmel again, or the village of the Kemmel.
Well, this is the town of Loker. Yeah. There's the famous church there. We're going to have a left-hand turn in a moment. This is the turn at the bottom of the Rodeberg, and there's Vicente Garcia Acosta. So he's comfortably back in the main field. On the right-hand side is Laszlo Bodrogi, and the style on the front there is a style that for many, many years we recognized in the TVM jersey, then more recently in the T-Mobile jersey. That is Servais Kanavan.
Winner of the 2001 Paris-Roubaix in grand style, when his team took first, second and third. That was a great year. Johan Museo was second, and Roman Veensteins, who was then the world champion, was third. A 1-2-3 for the squad.
Matty Heyman over on the right-hand side in the orange jersey of Team Rabobank. He'll be looking after one of his leaders here this afternoon, whether it be Juan Antonio Fletcher, Oscar Freire or Graham Brown. And Robbie McEwen was not telling lies this morning, was he? Because there he is, popping up at the front, realising how important it is to get over the Kemmelberg this time in the first 15
Robbie
riders.
said this morning he was looking for a result today, and there he is, right at the sharp end as they're approaching now the village of Kemmel and then onto the climb again for the second time. Seemingly a number of riders are planning on this. This boy looks tired now.
He's starting to suffer a little bit as he makes his ascent here up the Monteberg. And in days gone by, the climb went straight up over the top then, and the riders continued down towards the Kemmel and turned left. Now they've made it just that little bit more sensible, I think, and although there is a circuitous approach now to the Kemmelberg, it is just that little bit more sensible and safer for the riders. And I think with the level of the sport being raised as it is almost every year, you do have to consider the safety of the riders. The speeds are so much higher, the machines are so much faster, and that's just, I think, a very nice approach by the organisation here to try and find a good solution.
At 209 kilometres, it's added on a couple of kilometres though from its usual distance, but here we are, the three chasers at 2 minutes and 44 seconds and closing. Three very big names in our sport right now. The big up-and-comer, of course, is Massi Breschel. Had a magical season last year as a youngster. He'll be 24 years of age in August this year, so he's a Leo with his star sign. Very good sign, that, by the way, Paul.
Oh, what sign are you, by the way, Phil?
I'm a Leo, yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, well, that's a coincidence.
And 2:45 and a minute further back. So the reaction by the peloton has closed down a little bit on those three riders. And the word's gone out too for the boys on Barlow World to do some work too. Well, they've got two chances here, Baden Cook and Robbie Hunter, to deliver. The white jersey of Servais Kanavan is also driving. They've got sprinters too. The big one, the favourite, Mark Cavendish, is on Team High Road. The Milram boys on the far right driving for Eric Zabel. It could be coming down very quickly here. They're actually chasing those three down.
Well, they are, and I think what's going to happen, we're going to have a large group go over to Kemmelberg, and then we'll have a massive chase once we've summited the Kemmelberg, and the chase will be organised to catch those three riders in the middle. Stefan de Jong in the middle there for Team Quickstep. He had a nasty crash in the Ronde van Vlaanderen at the weekend, but he's bounced up and he's back again and in competition now. It's a bit precarious going around that shortcut.
Well, it is really. It's a bruised shoulder for sure in the morning there. That rider clipped it with his left shoulder. Somebody didn't even bother to make the corner there, Francois Deja, but he's back in the race at the wrong end, of course. These are the three on the little climbs now, which will thread our way through to the turn again. This is a 10% climb, the Monteberg. And the gap at 2:42, I'm beginning to salute this rider out front because he is actually riding extremely well, Capelli. If he can get over the top of the Kemmelberg, he might find some legs to hang on for a while.
I think that's a little bit of wishful thinking here this afternoon. Unfortunately, I'd like to see him survive and just watch the way these guys are taking risks. And, there you can see the rider from Francois Deja there trying to go around the corner. He jumps off the pavement and realizes, oops, there's nowhere really for me to go. The gap now between the second group on the road and the peloton field is starting to reduce. So they're taking that rather more seriously. They gave them a certain amount of freedom, and now they're getting themselves a lot more interested and concerned on the approach of the Kemmelberg for the second time.
Just look at the speed of the peloton now, and it's very hard when the road keeps twisting and turning like this. Milram have got the men up front here, so to Lambau credit. I bet Tom Steers is still at the back of the race at the moment. Well, it's Top Sport, I think, at the front at the moment.
Yes, it's Top Sport on the front, new jerseys for them. They're looked after by Walter Planckaert, himself a former winner of the Tour of Flanders, one of the great Planckaert trio. And brought together this fairly good team with, of course, on this team, Nico Eekhout, who has won himself, as you said, an awful lot of races. Never been the man for the big one-day races, but he could come up with a win in something like the Ghent Wevelgem race here.
See Aqua Saponi in the red jerseys there. Gabriella Balducci, possible sprinter for them. Luca Paolini. If it comes down to the decision, a lot of good sprinters in the race. It really is a very good field today, this. And it looks as though they're having a pretty good ride altogether.
There's Napolitano over on the right-hand side, riding at the front, and in fact a little bit of a giggle there because Stefan de Jonge was just hanging on to his saddle, just for a bit of fun. Nothing nasty, just fun.
No.
You've got to have a bit of a laugh now and again when
Break
you're
the
riding.
monotony.
Yep, especially as we're approaching the Kemmelberg. There won't be too much monotony when that happens.
I tell you, Napolitano could be a good card to play today. He knows it. He's got form. 2 wins already in the month of February. He's gone a little bit off the boil, but not a lot as we're heading through the middle of April. A bit of a tight traffic jam to get round that corner as well. 2:23, it plays 3:21 between the two groups.
Locked in at the 1 minute mark, and still 2:22 to the lone leader, Ermanno Capelli, who must be wondering, how am I going to get over to Kemmelberg again? He's had a very long, hard ride out here, but I have to say, fortunately for him, Phil, this afternoon, there hasn't really been a lot of wind, and that's normally the biggest adversary for the professional riders in Ghent Wevelgem, the wind as it batters in off the sea. But we didn't actually quite make it to the coast here this afternoon. The closest we really got was Verne before turning down towards the south and Popereng.
Just turning away underneath the Panna, which is on the coast. The Panna was where the 3 days of the Panna was held quite recently. Always a good indicator as the riders try to find the legs for the Spring Classic season. But here we go now, Top Sport bringing them around. And you can always trust the Belgian riders to know the way to the front when it matters most. They're almost queuing up here. Just look, they're blocking the complete road. They can't race. They're queuing to get round the corner. And once they're round that corner, they've got to chase the wheel in front. It is very, very difficult to get back up to speed. And a huge peloton, Paul. That is a really big peloton. If that lot come down to Wevelgem, we'll be in trouble.
Yeah, we will. It's one of the biggest pelotons I said I've seen at this stage of Ghent Wevelgem, and it will change, I'm sure, a fraction. But the fact is, because there hasn't been these big, strong winds, it's normally the big, strong winds that force the riders into these echelon formations across the main field, and that's what splits the race up. That hasn't happened here this afternoon, but it does give the advantage to a lot of the sprinters in this race because they'll still have a lot of teammates left to chase down any breakaways towards the end. There's big Eric Zabel moving up into the middle.
Eric and Servais Knaven in the white. Servais certainly picked his victories over the years. A stage win in the Tour de France, the national title in Holland, the Paris-Roubaix stage race. He knows the ones to take out, that's for sure. Now there's the peloton. As we go up the road, we'll find the 3 riders. There they are. And of course we're in the helicopter from this shot, so the riders behind will know where we are and where these 3 riders are.
That's the difficult thing about the top professional bike races, because they use all of those technical things to their advantage. They will know that the race helicopter is hovering over the breakaway, and although they might not be able to see the breakaway on these narrow roads around the Heuvelland, they can judge just exactly what the distance is between them and the leaders, or the prey in this case, which is the 3-man group in between the 2.
But look, you've got to take your hat off to Ermanno Capelli here. He's still got over 3 minutes on the peloton, and these boys are not exactly racing up to him, are they? 2 minutes 10. I reckon he'd probably crack up on the Kemmelberg. He might lose 30 or 40 seconds in one lump there.
Yep, he would probably lose a good 30 to 45 seconds on the Kemmelberg the second time. But once he's got over there, he's got to get himself organised and try and think about how he's going to get from the finish and the something like 35 kilometres to get himself to the finish line here in Wevelgem. And it's not an easy route as we take the swing round into the left here. We're now getting into the outskirts of the town of Kemmel. There is the Kemmelberg over on the left-hand side. A big famous lump in this part of the world. Breschel got his hand up. He's looking to see whether or not he can get the team management to come forward. And that's the difficult thing, Phil, about racing here, because these areas are so open and you're crisscrossing around the fields, and Breschel's got a flat tyre.
Oh, that really is bad luck. That is terrible luck, that, because that's a strong man. He'll get a quick wheel change, I hope, but it's all too late. He'll go back into the peloton straight away. They've been given a bit of a gift there, haven't they?
And that, you see, is a little bit of a change in the tactics too, because now that they've taken Matti Breschel out of the formula, it means that Team CSC are going to have to come to the front and do a little bit of work, because they've lost their man in the breakaway.
Well, that is very sad luck. Sad when that happens, I must confess. He's got his wheel changed, but he won't race on. He'll wait now for the peloton, who must be just off our camera here. and he'll get back in there. Well, that's weakened the chase for Shaw now.
It wasn't a quick change either. I
No.
reckon that change was around about the 20 to 25 seconds, and as he looks over his shoulder there, he can see the main field, so he realizes the best part of valor now is to wait for the main field and look for another tactic a little bit later on, because it's put the pressure now onto Team CSC to try and get themselves organised at the front end of the main field. I don't think, Phil, there's going to be any organised chase until we've gone over the Kemmelberg for the final time, and then we'll see which team has decided that it's got the strongest sprinter on the block. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that work being done by Team High Road.
It's just as well the Shimano boys were in the gap there, because clearly the referees had not allowed any team cars in that gap because it wasn't big enough on these narrow roads. And at least he got a wheel, but now it's a case of get back in. And I don't know if his team will know just yet whether he's actually departed the breakaway.
They will have seen him, because they were just coming around a corner on the other side of a field at the time when he had the flat tyre. So they will have got it pretty much sorted out there, and they will have known the situation, and they can see him now, because the gap between Breschel there just at the front and the main field is not much more than about 10 seconds.
It's very unusual too to punch on these very good roads and good conditions today.
Pozzato saying, well, what happened to that guy? He was riding pretty strongly and he's no longer here. And Gilbert saying, well, actually, you know, he's had this flat tyre and he won't be with us anymore, so let's carry on and get on with the job at hand.
Well, they're inside 2 minutes, those two, from the leader now. Not so sure it's a viable proposition anymore. There's poor old Matty dropping back in. As I say, last year he had a great mid-season, well, almost late season really, in the month of August in Denmark and in Ireland, winning stages at both occasions, and also finishing a high finish in the Tour of Denmark.
I have to say he is a man for the future, but you've got an indication of how the main field is riding, because he's cruising along there and they're actually not pulling him back into the fold just yet, because they're waiting. This is a moment's pause before they start the acceleration. This is another accident in the back.
This looks like a crash, doesn't it?
Yeah, it looks like it's one of the riders from Lamprey who's gone down quite hard.
Well, he's sorting himself out.
Couldn't quite catch who that was.
It's Christian Moreau who went down there. You're impressed with that?
Very.
Okay. We'll just wait for our caption generator to tell us it's true, but otherwise we'll have to take my word. That was Christian Moreau who just Moreau, M-U-R-R-O, by the way. Back onto the Kemmelberg with our lone leader. At least he's had the honour of being the lone leader up on both occasions. And the crowd, shortly after the peloton go by, will follow this with interest on the television at the top here. He's out of the saddle now. He's really having to work. Those legs are pretty tired, and well they might be. He's led for most of the race.
He has, and you can see just how difficult this climb is. It's not a hard climb if you just start at the bottom and ride to the top. And
as we used to do.
You've come out in the car for the afternoon, but if you ride 170 kilometers by the time you get there, well, that's a slightly different story.
Isn't it just? Anyway, this is the case of the boys getting to the front now. Frere has come up here as well. Lamprey probably unaware of the loss of one of their teammates at the back.
Roger Hammond in the middle there in the white jersey of Team High Road.
He knows the right place to be when it matters.
Alessandro Balan, the Lamprey rider, over on the left-hand side. Everybody's now a little bit nervous. Juan Antonio Fletcher on the right-hand side, while this man, as you would say, plows a lonely furrow at the front end of the main field, and he's probably seriously gritting his teeth right now and thinking to himself, oh, let this climb be over.
Well, I'm not surprised, but I like the new showing developer. It's very attractive. Slight change on last year's design as he comes up towards the summit. He's given everybody plenty of time to view them today. He can't possibly stay away, but you know, the other day in the Circuit de la Sarthe, stage number 1, Thomas Voigtler and a teammate were away, and they had a lead of a matter of seconds, many kilometres from the finish, and the peloton never caught them because they were disrupted by falls, flat tyres, chases, etc., and they held them off all the way to the line. So it does happen.
It does happen. These are the twee achtervolgers, the two chasers, Pipo Pozzato and Philippe Gilbert. They've started the climb here, and they're actually now on the same climb as this man who's dragging himself up to the top. That little bit of smooth tarmac there, an indication that he's not much more than about 100 meters from the summit, and there he is onto the flatter part of the course. But there is a huge crowd out here on the Kemmelberg, only 530 meters of cobblestones, and as we've said a couple of times, a slightly safer descent off the climb than we've had over previous years.
Well, the motorbikes are still with the boys here. We're in the gap at 1 minute 14 now. They're closing in quite rapidly. They should pick him up in the next 10 or 15k. He's over the top now, more or less. These boys are coming up to it as well. And down through that private drive, round the back door and back out. This time, though, we head towards where we finish now in Wevelgem. Just look at this pressure going on at the front now by Rabobank. It's either Fletcher or Frere. It looks like it's Frere.
Well, it's a good aggressive move. They realise now at about 36 kilometres to go, 170 odd kilometres into the race, that this is the time to try and make a chance move and pull 5 or 6 riders off the front end of the main field. That's Juan Antonio Fletcher on the front there. And there's Alessandro Ballan, Danilo Napolitano taking up the chase behind him. Fletcher really is riding well over the last couple of days. There's George Hincapie as well. They're not too far away from the front end of the main field, enjoying these cobblestones. Eric Zabel over to the right in the pale blue jersey of Team Milram. He's looking to make himself a rider who can make contact.
Well, George's father and George's brother have arrived in town yesterday to see him ride today, so maybe he wants to impress them. Although they told us George was concentrating on Sunday and was probably going to use this one as a training ride. I'm glad I didn't take the word when I tried to pick the winners this morning.
Well, the important thing for a guy like George is to stay at the front end of the main field, and if the situation arises that you can get away and get yourself a nice little victory, then go for it. Here's Hincapie. He's riding up in 4th position.
Cool.
He looks very good. He's in great form. There's Napolitano. There you can see is Eric Zabel. Looking to see where Tom Bonin is. He was riding at the front end of the main field a few moments ago, but maybe the legs aren't so great this afternoon. There's O'Grady going through.
Still there and very much in contention there, Stuart. He said he'd be up there today, and he's up there right now when it matters, over the last time of the Kemmelberg. These boys are saying, if I can hang on just for a few minutes more, we'll be back with them, and I'll be in with a shout of a sprint win.
Well, just look at the clock at the top there. The 2 chasers, the 2 riders in the middle, are only 1 minute now behind the lone leader, Ermanno Capelli. He will very shortly receiving company for the first time for about 4 hours here this afternoon.
10 minutes his lead when he came on air today. It's now down to less than 1 as the boys go around the back streets here, but at least it's smooth and dry. I'm not sure about this descent in the wet, but it's dry today. Splits in the peloton. Bit of work required from the chasers.
Now they'll have to get themselves organised. It's the sharp bend halfway down. And this time it's really the acceleration of the Kemmelberg this time which has caused the little gaps to appear in the main field. The gaps are not so big for us to stop this group coming back together, I don't think.
No, I think you're right. It should come back. Which is going to be a sort of a record-sized peloton for many years going down to Wevelgem.
Absolutely, and we'll be, I think, treated to a very serious long chase on the run. And there's Geert Stegeman's going by there just for Team Quickstep. A lot of riders wondering whether or not they want to dig deep into their reserves on a race like this afternoon, because they know in a couple of days' time on Friday, most of them will be going down to the cobblestones of Paris-Roubaix to just check out, to go on a reconnaissance ride. And then they've got to travel down to the outskirts of Paris on Saturday. So pretty busy and hectic few days for most of these professionals.
Well, with the yellow flag, they're not working with quite the enthusiasm of the gendarmes in the Tour de France, but nonetheless being very effective.
This is Ballan, who's seen the chance of creating a little bit of a split, and he's created a little bit of a flurry of activity a bit further back there. Fletcher in second, Hincapie moving up. There's a couple more CSC riders stuck on the back there as well.
Nice catch, well done. George takes on board a bottle as well.
Frédéric Guédon is a rider there on the left from Française de Jeux.
Frere is in this group as well, Paul. There's about 4 men back there.
He is. He wasn't too far away as we came up to the summit of the Kemmelberg on that occasion. They've seen this as a chance to try and move off the front.
Frere was 3rd last year behind Berghardt and Hammond, ahead of the other sprinter, Ventoso from Sonia Duval. And there is a little bit of a split, but it should cross. Well, the gap is open for the moment, but they should chase it down.
It just depends on the composition of that leading group and whether or not they decide to get the hammer down very quickly, because they can consolidate on a breakaway like that. But if all of a sudden they see that almost everybody concerned in the race is there, then they may well slow down. There you can see this is Oscar Freire coming to the front. He's overtaking Fabien Cancellara. Always a strong man to have in a breakaway like this.
It's a big worry for the rest of the riders. See the man on form, Cancellara, former winner now of Paris-Roubaix 2 years ago. Freire just doing enough to impress and then swinging off the front. There is still a gap behind. If they can keep this pressure on, you never know, because if riders have got their sprinters in this group, they won't be chasing even though they're quite close, and they'll be hoping they can pull the whole of the rest of the race away the wrong way from the front
Still a pretty big group there. You can see the next group on the road coming by. I have a feeling that once they drop into Kemmel, that should all come back together, because there wasn't really a big organisation. Although Martin Elbinger tried to put me wrong here as well, because he's decided to accelerate. Former winner of the Tour Down Under, and he's seen his chance of getting clear.
He's trying to work clear because he sends a lot of riders. See all the Rabobank boys left back there with Frere up front. They're not going to chase.
Well, the serious thing to do now is just to resolve the differences, allow forces to assemble at the front end of the group, and then start a strong concerted effort. And the race is not too badly separated either, because you've still got the lone leader Capelli, who now has just got 41 seconds advantage over the two chasers, and a minute 21 to the main field. So, you know, in the long straight running down the main road towards Wevelgem, they'll actually all see each other.
Diaz is the rider from Boyd Telecom. It's out at the back here, and Elmiger working together on these very narrow roads. But it's our cameras obviously have lost contact with the two front runners. At least we've lost contact with them just for the moment, but they're still up there, and our time telling us 39 seconds the gap now, as they try to pick up the race-long lone leader, Marno Capelli.
Well, they've still got a little move
the gap's
there.
opening, you know.
Yep, they have actually got themselves a move, and I think it's because it could very well be the right combination. We've got three riders in here from Team Rabobank. Now, they will be excited about that, because Fletcher, as we said earlier on, is on great form. But if anything happens down towards the end, they can always count on Oscar Freire to come up with the sprint.
Absolutely, and that's a huge move for Rabobank, who had a very good Tour of Flanders, but didn't get the result they wanted in the end. They did get Fletcher on the podium in third place, first Spanish rider ever to break into that event on the podium. There's three distinct pelotons right now, and you see there's not a following car in sight, nowhere. So there must be a fourth peloton at least behind.
Got four riders in this group, in fact, I think, Phil, for Team Rabobank. Looking a little bit further back, I can't see big Tom Bonen. I'll be surprised that he missed it, because he was riding at the front end of the main field, although maybe a little bit of lethargy caused him to miss the split on the Kemmelberg.
A bit of a merging anyway, because this second group is catching up, and the Liku Gas riders taking an interest in who might be coming back up here. Just having a look through. Barlow World have got men up here. Lamprey are well reinforced. All of the work being done by Rabobank.
A little bit of a precarious corner as we went around that one, but now we straighten up again and everybody gets themselves into the big long line. Team CSC have got a couple of riders in there. Hincapie looking comfortable in about 5th or 6th position, and that gap to that second group is still hovering around the 15 to 20 second mark. There's the next group on the road, and that's a very big group of riders, and I think this is probably the group that Tom Bonen is in, because I didn't see Bonen in that front split.
Well, he'll probably come back with this. Again, he's caught between the devil and the deep blue sea, isn't he? He wants to do well in this, but he doesn't want to use any energy in this, because he's thinking of a big ride on Sunday, so it's decision time. If he comes back in this next group, well, he might well be taking part in the sprint at the finish. These two boys, where would they have been if they hadn't have lost Matty Breschel right now, because he was a strong rider up here. Now they've got to do it themselves. Philippe Gilbert still talking there to Bazzato, who does speak a bit of English, and Gilbert also speaks English, so maybe that's the language of communication.
Well, they keep looking over their shoulders. They're not convinced that they've got it in their legs here this afternoon, and they realise that there is a big chase coming forward. Just looking down the line of riders there was big Matty Heyman on the front. Looking back to see the second group on the road as well, and there they are, and it still makes a very large group, but there must, as you said, Phil, be another larger group a little bit further back, because there are still, for the moment, no team cars in there.
And no way are they going to get up either until we get down to the main road, which makes all of these riders pretty vulnerable right now. Just a couple of motorbikes with spare wheels. These boys have got no cover. As we go up to the leader again, give him his moment of glory, which won't last much longer. 37 seconds is the gap. 29 kilometers, 20 seconds to these two riders. As they can see him, this is the situation that Philippe was in when he was chasing the group down on the first of those big circuits.
Looking back down there, you can see the pain on the face of all these guys. That second group is going to rejoin there, I'm almost certain, because that gap is down to around about the 10 or 12 second mark. And I'm sure there's a lot of riders from Quick-Step in that group would like to pull Tom Bonen back into the fold.
Just wondering if Robbie McEwen has made this split, because he was up near the front as they approached the Kelm. We can't see him now, but as you all know, Robbie McEwen can stay totally invisible until the last minute. And our cameras never seem to seek him out. but that group is coming back. It's going to get back nicely.
Well, having said that, there he is. He's in the
Where?
front group there, just at the back on the right-hand side. I caught a
There
little
he
glimpse
is, absolutely,
there
yes.
of the national champion of Australia, stripes on his jersey, just keeping himself not too far away from danger, but he did get himself over the Kemmelberg, Phil, in a nice position. He didn't have to try too much to stay in contact with the group, but here we're going to see, I think in the next 2 kilometers or so, the whole of this race come back together.
Wouldn't surprise me if Robbie doesn't deliver the blow today, because he's looking pretty useful. That's assuming, of course, they do pick up the riders out in front.
Not too far off the front now. We're talking about 25 seconds from this group up to the lone leader, Hermano Capelli, and we're talking about 10 seconds to the 2 riders caught in the middle, Philippe Gilbert and Pipo Pozzato, who are themselves very shortly going to get caught. Here they are, looking over the shoulders. They know, I think, Phil, that race is pretty much done for them.
Oh yes, they're closing right in now, and it was big effort, but it's been coming very, very quickly here. And it looks as though the loss of Matty Breschel's cut short, or might have been a godsend in disguise. The fact that they've been wiped out earlier than they might have been if Breschel had been up here. Who knows? It's all history now. 24 seconds to these two, and the blanket was almost over the whole race of Ghent Wevelgem. Now this has never been a great race for McEwen. He hardly ever rides it, and he certainly never had a place in it. And he's right in the position today. And when Robbie says something, you tend to remember what he says. And this morning he said, yeah, I've been training all week, and for the first time this year, I'm feeling like a professional cyclist again. So I think he really wants a result today.
Well, it's certainly the kind of race that should suit Robbie McEwen. It's a race for great sprinters. And as you can see here, Philippe Gilbert about to make contact with our lone leader, Hermano Capelli. So that makes 3 riders at the front of the race. But the main field are not much more than 24 seconds in arrears, and this is just really now a question of time as to when those 3 riders get pulled into the fold by the main field, which is still a very large main field, although again they still don't have any supporting vehicles behind them, so there still should be a rather large group, maybe not much more than 30 or 40 seconds in arrears.
I wonder what Capelli thinks now. He's got company, and he finds out how relaxing it is to ride behind them now. For the first time, taking somebody else's drafting. The whole of Rabobank here are massing at the front because they've got all of the men in this group. The real strength of the team today. Frere, Heyman doing a lion's share of the work. Fletcher is up here. 13 seconds is the gap. They're not going to leave them out there too long now before they jump on them.
They are.
They're in the same horrible sight.
It's not good for these 3 riders. We're down to inside of 15 seconds. Capelli, he's made his name known to everybody around Belgium and in Italy and the rest of Europe here this afternoon, because he's been on live television for around about an hour and a half, and he's still up there and still got his name spread around the world on the airwaves. But very shortly he will also have the company of the main field. Pozzato still continuing there, but as you can see, Phil, it's pretty much a dedicated main field there. You've got that long line of Rabobank riders at the front. They're obviously feeling very confident. There's Roger Hammond over to the right-hand side. It's difficult to get into the main field in a situation like this, just to try and identify all the riders who are present. Team High Road have got a lot of good riders in the race here. Cavendish is joined by Bernard Eisel, who himself rode a very good Tour of Flanders at the weekend.
Oh, I saw Frere there. He seemed to be shouting at the boys. More speed required. Hello, there's a message coming through on the earpiece there. And this peloton has grown hugely now, and still right up near the front, and must be fancying his chances a little bit. Is Roger Hammond in the white for Team High Road? Stein de Volder dreaming of the magical double, or part of the trifecta with the Paris-Roubaix still to come, who knows? He's here. From the helicopter, it doesn't look that big a bunch, but down below it looks as though it's really big. But what would that be? 55, 60 riders, I guess.
I would say that'll be the maximum. There's a large armada of motor bicycles behind as well. That's the motor bicycles of all the press, radio, and the photographers trying to get themselves in the pictures of these guys that are leading up to Paris-Roubaix. That's still a big gap there. You can see the team cars are a little bit in arrears now. They may well be coming across the gap. So at 26 kilometers to go, Phil, that's pretty much all together.
60 plus we'll settle for until they tell us differently, and we're without the luxury of radio tour today, so we can't hear what's going on out on the course. But Philippe Gilbert, I think, made the right move there. Very typical Gilbert move. Unlucky that Breschel punctured, and now the others are coming back on here. No sympathy from the riders from Rabobank, who just thought, well, that was a daft move, and puts them all back in the peloton at 25 kilometres to go. Just over 15 miles to the finish. Sat at the back here, the man we would like to think might win, Mark Cavendish. He's better move up from that position. He must have come back in that second group, Paul.
He came back in the second group, I'm certain about that, but he doesn't have to worry too much about riding at the back now because we've had a major sort out. There's no real worry about the wind here this afternoon splitting the race up, so I think he's just taking the risk of staying at the back end of the main field and not fighting at the front and using up too much energy. Once it comes to the more serious part of this race, a teammate or two will drop back to look after him and pacing up to the front 10 or 15 riders as we prepare for the sprint.
Well, he's waiting till he clears these narrow roads here. Danger lurks around every bend because you just don't know what might happen. A touch of wheels, and there is the other half of the Ghent Wevelgem. I think that gap is too much, you know.
Well, it's still a very big field, and I wonder
It's
who's
huge.
going to do the pacemaking on the front end of that group, because the front end of the leading group, we've got a dedicated Team Rabobank, quite happy to keep the pace as high as possible. And in another 5 or 10 kilometers, this group will lose its morale and its impetus to actually chase down and pull themselves back into this race. But I tell you what,
Well,
that group now is spread across the road, and that's an indication that the pressure is not on. We could be looking here, Phil, at the largest bunch sprint we've had in Ghent Wevelgem in many years.
We could easily be doing that, Paul. That is a huge bunch which is coming up, and they're going to take a little bit of strength in the fact that they're closing in at 24 kilometers to go, so there must be a lot of riders back here who haven't got teammates up in that leading group. This is the most unusual Ghent Wevelgem. They haven't broken the field up.
Well, they haven't. It's all really to do with the weather conditions here this afternoon.
Virtually no wind, Paul. The flags here just all drooping on the flagpoles.
I think the riders are getting a little bit of respite, really, Phil, after the very difficult weekend they had. There's one of the big riders from Crédit Agricole. He's just trying to get himself organised, trying to look at the faces of these riders in this group to see just exactly who is up here. Looks like a little bit further back, that's Capella there as well.
Well, I was rather hoping we might have seen on Crédit Agricole Jeremy Hunt here, the British rider. We're totally biased, of course, but I have to say that Jeremy's such a great guy, and it's always nice to see him in at the kill. He says he's going all right, but I don't know whether he's made the split. He might be coming up in the last big pack. Heavens above, the whole race is coming up in the back. 39 seconds is the split between the two big pelotons, and 24 kilometers, shortly become 23, is all we've got to ride to the finish here.
Well, if they can make the contact in the next 5 to 10 kilometers, then they will feel a lot more happy. But that is a huge group there, in fact, and not a lot of riders doing the pacemaking on the front.
Baden Cook on the front just now. Sprinter just keeping his nose clean at the front of the race, but not overworking. Well done, Baden. Comes from down by on the outskirts of Melbourne, on the beach road near St Kilda.
Looks like Martin Den Bakker on the front here for skill, and he's a rider who's been a professional for many, many years, and riding on one of the smaller teams, but a team that has been recognised as a team that is prepared to take the racing to the event, and that's why they've been invited as a wild card to a number of ASO events, sponsoring thoughts that they could possibly get an invitation to the Tour de France in the near future.
Nothing would surprise me right now, but I have to say that Den Bakker here, Paul, is got 27 wins, but he's in his 19th season as a professional, which is longer than almost anybody's ever ridden.
Well, that's looking up along the lines of somebody like Sean Kelly or even Joop Zoetemelk. This is the Kop van de Wegstrijd. There you can see still big Matty Heyman on the front. They're trying to figure out whether or not that group is going to come back. They would like to keep this situation like this, Phil, because it would be a lot less complicated if we had a smaller group going into the finish. I just noticed one of the team cars coming across the gap there, and that means that these guys have got at least a little bit of technical support. But Rabobank are very happy with this situation, even though it's a fairly large group still. It's a lot safer to sprint out of a group like this than a group of around about 150 riders, because that is what I think it would be if this race came back together. There's the second group, a very large group at 40 seconds.
Well, fine riding on the front of that lead group by Matty Heyman. He's been a pro for 9 seasons now himself. Big win came in 2006 in Melbourne when he won the Commonwealth Games road race. But he's not on this team to win. He's just a tremendous workhorse for the event. Doesn't win a lot of bike races, but he does ride well for the team. And that's why year after year he keeps getting a contract with one of the biggest teams in the world, because he first started to ride for Rabobank almost from the day he turned pro.
Well, a move here from Astana now, where they've not been too happy by the fact that the race has started to slow down a fraction. And that's always a good time to move after you've had a really long, hard chase. The moment that it slows down, hit them hard, because people will go, oh, I don't want to hurt again. And you'll slow down for 5 or 10 seconds, and that gives you the chance to open up a small break.
Well, we're into the town of Hollebeke here, which is just on the outskirts of Ypres. That will put us at about 187 kilometers covered. This little split group is about to be rejoined by the boys again.
It looks as if there's another one about to form. That was a great acceleration coming there. But then all of a sudden it's slowed down, and the main field has started to come back in. We're going to have a long chase like this, Phil, all the way down into the outskirts of Maine and then Wevelgem, with riders now starting to think, well, this is my chance today. I've got a chance of winning myself a semi-classic, a race which has been around for an awful long time.
Well, the winners for the last few years at least. Last year's Marcus Berghout, who keeps getting problems with his knees, and he's still sort of in and out of injuries. Thor Hushoff got the win in 2006, and the Belgians, Nico Matan in 05, and the great Tom Bonen when he was developing in 04. We'll see who gets it today, but certainly Hushoff must be in here somewhere, and certainly Bonen is in here somewhere, but we're not sure he's quite made the front split.
Well, that gap is starting to split open once again. Serious move on the front. This is the peloton. Team Cofidis trying to drag themselves back into the race here this afternoon. They've been caught out. And again, the front end of the main field, they are now actually starting to seriously race over this one.
Yet another attack, and these attacks are going to keep on coming. We're into 20 kilometers to go to the finish now. These flurries of attacks might save this peloton from the ignominy of being swept up, but they're working flat out. They're not going to allow riders to get too far away. The domestiques now are trying to work things away from the field to try and take the pressure off their sprinters.
Well, I think we're going to have a serious talk with the race referees, because the motorbikes are actually creating a lot of these accelerations.
Yeah.
And I noticed at the weekend in the Ronde van Vlaanderen, the motorbikes were in fact provoking a lot of the attacks at the front end of the main field, as if the race referees didn't quite have the strength to snap out their orders and get them out of the way. This is Kurt Adler Arvidsson who's moving clear, a former under-23 world champion, a great bike rider, and this is a good kind of move for Team CSC.
It's a huge move, and Scott Sunderland, who's managing the boys here, we said how well he was riding the other day in Tour of Flanders, and he said he is a man for this area and he has very, very good form. Obviously feeling very fresh with 19 kilometers to go, and above all taking the pressure off the team, because there's got to be a reaction now. The riders have got to chase him.
I thought his comment was actually rather good, because his team manager said, you're really good here with the cobblestones. He says, yes, I'm a bit like potatoes. I go well with everything.
He's 33 years of age now. Kurt Adler Arvidsson began life in our books when he was the under-23 world champion in 1997.
This is starting to hurt. This is Martin Elmiger on the front. I noticed he was on the bookkeeper's boards here at the finish line as a fine outside chance of a bet for the victory here. The amazing thing about Belgium at the finish line, there is open betting on bike races,
which is totally
outside
illegal.
the bar. I'm not sure if it is illegal, but
it's illegal as far as the world body is concerned, but you can go and put a few bob on anybody you like down the road here.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, just about 50 meters beyond the finish line, there's a man sitting there with a pint of beer and a cigar in his mouth, of course, because he's a Belgian. And he's taking as much money as you like on any of these riders, with some riders coming in at 100 to 1. And a race like today, that might be a good bet.
This race has had its surprise winners in the past, but it doesn't look like, to me, it's going to get a surprise winner today, because the sprinters are beginning to lick their lips. Just how many motorbikes are arriving for this event now?
Yeah, well, that's just what I was saying. There's a little bit of lack of control there, I think, where the motorbikes are concerned. Although it's not the rider's fault, I hasten to add, if a rider tries to take advantage of the motorbike, he cannot be held in any way responsible. It's the job of the race referees to get the motorbikes out of the gap and keep the race clean. Now, these two riders, if they get together, will form a very strong allegiance. Look at the motorbikes there going around this corner. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, quite agree. Is Graham Watson one of those, our photographer?
Absolutely, probably.
No, he would never do that. But this is getting past a joke now. Look, the riders here waving their arms. They can't clear it in time. I can imagine we can't hear Radio Tour today, but those motorbikes will be getting the race referees screaming down their earpieces to get away. Look at the arms now. He'll make a good windmill, that guy in red up front.
Well, if he flaps them anymore, he's going to
take
off.
He will, yeah. 18 kilometers to go. He's got the gap a little bit now, so they're getting a bit of sanity here. And this actually is a superb move here. Two very strong men with good teammates behind, willing to block them. Martin Elmiger, former champion of his country, which is Switzerland, and his big win came a couple of years ago in the Tour Down Under in Australia. Nice gap.
Yeah, very good gap, and they're starting to slow down. They don't quite know how to handle this at 17 kilometers, just over 10 miles to go to the finish. But these accelerations and decelerations will actually bode well for the two men in the front. But again, Team Rabobank, Phil, have decided they want to try and keep this nice and organised. I think there's the race referee now having a very big shout at all the motorbikes, because they are getting too dangerous and too much in the way going around these corners.
Martin Swinkels, who we know pretty well as a Belgian referee, is in charge, and he will not be happy. But they've got them going down, the two of them going clear. Kurt Attel Arvesen already had one big win this year, not too far away, the Grand Prix E3. The E3 is the European highway, and it takes its name of the race, and he won that one. And so he's got good form, and we saw him have a terrific Tour of Flanders as well, in which he crossed the line in the end in 7th place.
Yeah, this group are now trying to force a small group off the front end of the. It's a big group, even so, for this stage of the Ghent Wevelgem race, and I wonder whether or not that second group is going to come back.
I don't think
they were around about 40 seconds behind this main body of riders here, and I think once they start to see that they're not pulling themselves back into the race anymore, Phil, they'll start to give up. There you're looking at around about 29 seconds.
Well, these boys are going to give it their best shot. This is their shot now. There'll be no second chance if that race comes back. 17 kilometers, and that is the chance now for these two to make a little bit of a name for themselves. Both strong riders. Martin Elmiger drives on.
Martin's a very strong rider, and as you say, he rode a very dominant Tour Down Under and held on to the lead in that competition. But having a man like Kurt Attel Arvesen with him, they've got a good chance of creating the big surprise here this afternoon. But I do think that one team or another will get themselves organised in that group behind. There is the main body of riders left behind, still trying to pull themselves into this race.
Elmiger is another man for the classics, that's for sure. He's never been in the top 10 of any classic except two. 9th in Milan-San Remo in 2006 and 8th in the Tour of Lombardy in 2005, both in Italy.
Christophe Mongeat, the French rider, former French cyclocross champion, trying to get himself across the gap. He's looking to try and bridge a 13-second gap. This is a false flat here before we turn on to the big main road once the riders get into the outskirts of the town called Zornebeck. Looking back, that's a big gap. That's gone. The main field.
That's gone, Paul.
I think they've cracked now.
Yes, that's a huge gap. It's down to the attack of these two riders. It's caused a reaction for sure. But the boys in the back group now have turned off. They'll pedal home and wait to race on Sunday. So their training can continue while these two still think of winning Ghent Wevelgem here.
Well, Stuart O'Grady now has decided to come in and do the team work for his mate. That's O'Grady in 3rd position, just nailing back Juan Antonio Fletcher, who saw a slight opportunity to break free there. But now that they've been brought back into the fold, this group will slow down a fraction. O'Grady, I think, riding very well, and we can watch out for him on Sunday, because it's great to think that a man who almost finished his career in the Tour de France last year with that very nasty accident is actually now back and riding well.
He has a huge decision to make this year, because upcoming is the Beijing Olympic Games. He won gold on the track 4 years ago. His country, Australia, want him to ride the track. He wants to ride the road. So he's not making any decision. One thing's for sure, he's going to the Olympic Games. We just don't know to do what. And he's talking, Paul, of riding the Giro d'Italia just to get some legs, because of he lost most of last year's, you know, with that horrible crash in the Tour de France.
Well, he's a tough character. That's Frédéric Guédon in 2nd place there for Team Française des Jeux. He's a very canny rider, won some big races in his career. I think he's won less than 10 races, but I don't think he cares too much, because one of those is Paris-Roubaix. The other one is Paris Tours.
Yes, and you don't get much better than that. Now, would all these motorcyclists kindly move on, as they're so anxious to get the right decision here. The police car can't get through, and the outriders have got him through now. These are crucial moments, and this race has already got itself a little bit of a bad reputation a couple of years ago when Nico Matin was the winner, because they said he took advantage of the motorbikes in the last kilometre. It was not his fault. He won, though. And whether he did or not was never quite clear on the television pictures either. But there was no doubt there was too many motorcyclists in the last kilometre.
Well, this is how to demoralise a counter-attack there. You see Stuart O'Grady is just sitting on the back of these riders. He's got a great reputation, O'Grady. He's a top rider, one of the best riders in the world. He's sitting there in 3rd place because he's got a teammate in front And those other two guys, I think, well, why are we dragging Stuart O'Grady across? Why are we giving him a free ride? Because, yes, we might catch the two riders in front, but once we do, we've given O'Grady a free ride and he'll whack us in the finish.
Yeah, well, that's the advantage of when you've got the cards to play, you play them. These are the two leaders here. Arvidsson in the lead for the moment, and Elminger is the man up in second place here. 2001 he turned pro. He's only won 10 races, you say, but he picks them well. And he drives on. It's Kenziato is the rider I couldn't recognise. He had to be Italian with those sunglasses on as he pushes on.
Well, he's a big, strong rider, comes from a very good track background. A little bit further back, I can't understand here, Phil, the tactics now of Team Rabobank. There's a lot of Rabobank riders in that group, but in fact they've backed off and they've allowed two small groups to go off the front end of the main field. They really need to get to the front and control this if they want to try and get their man Oscar Freire into a position to win. There you can see the way the race is forming out. The two leaders have only got themselves 11 seconds advantage over the next group on the road, and another 4 or 5 seconds back to the front end of the main field.
I'll say Francis de Jeux have become a real good player amongst the teams in this last couple of seasons, with big wins, especially in Paris Tours, etc. Always in the action. Gilbert's given them a lot of credibility too, as Frédéric Guédon. Now we're looking at Christophe Mongin, who's up in the driving seat in the middle at the moment. Don't know if you call that the passenger seat or what.
Well, that'll be the passenger seat.
Okay.
And, just sitting in the back. This is the real passenger seat, though, for Stuart O'Grady, and nobody's going to deny him from that, because he's just going to sit there and he realises that he's got a great position with his mate in the leading group of two riders. Christophe Mongin was in the counter moves just a few moments ago. He's been replaced here by his teammate Frédéric Guédon, who has come to the front to give some assistance here.
9 seconds.
As they try and nail back 9 seconds to the Kop van der Wegstraat, the front of the race.
What decisions will be made if Stuart O'Grady gets carried up? This will be something I don't think he's expecting at the moment. He's just, he did tell us at the start he would be in amongst it at the finish, and you can't get much closer than 12 kilometres from the end and be right up there and being carried along. And here he is, 1:48. Mongin is doing all the pacemaking. Now what's happened? Quinziato, a little bit perplexed. Now tell me, why aren't you working, Stuart?
Well, if you look at my jersey,
what the Australian would say.
If you look at my jersey, mate, it says Team CSC. You look at that jersey up the road, that says Team CSC as well. So you pull yourself together and get this race back.
Could be playing a game of snap, of course.
He very well could be, but I see there's a little bit of organisation on the front end of the main field now. I saw a lot of white jerseys with Team High Road written all across them, and that's because Mark Cavendish is in this group, and they're probably starting to feel now that he's got a chance to prove to us why we regard him as probably the next top sprinter in the world.
Yes, he's such an exciting bike rider, and I have to say it makes a change to say he comes from the Isle of Man. It's a long time since they've turned out world-class riders. The one that was a world-class rider, Peter Buckley, in the 60s, and he was sadly killed when a dog ran out while he was training and he fell and crashed on his head. And that was a great loss. Peter Buckley won a gold medal. I think it's the only gold medal in cycling the Isle of Man have ever won.
Well, Roger Hammond was at the front end of the main field there, looking after the position of his man Cavendish. George Hincapie noticeable by his absence in this group. Maybe they're counting on a two-pronged attack by Hincapie and of course by Mark Cavendish. There you can see the two leaders just in front at around about 5 seconds. But the way this race is developing at the moment, we may well see it all come back together at 4 or 5 kilometres to go. But if Stuart O'Grady gets into this group, you'll see a complete different change in his attitude.
And what a terrific tactic too for Team CSC. He's done exactly what he should do, Stuart, but he had the common sense and the quick witness to jump into that move when it started. And now they look over the shoulder to try and see just what 3 riders are joining. Well, I tell you what, Kurt Attel Arvidsson is going to feel pretty proud when he sees Big Stewie come up and join him at the front here.
Well, that's a great advantage for Team CSC, and I think that has always been their advantage when it comes to the one-day classics, the power in numbers. It's important to have teammates in a situation like this, and once O'Grady makes the contact, which is about to happen right now, Phil, at 10 kilometres to go. Look at that, immediately O'Grady says, OK, we've got a chance, but he may have left this just a little bit too late because there's the main field.
And we're looking at 9 seconds, Paul, to the main field. The sprinters aren't going to get robbed here, are they? This is going to be a hurly-burly, a commentator's nightmare when I would like to get out the commentary box about 400 metres to go if I can't recognise anybody, but the field
unfortunately,
is
I
now
have to do
coming
that.
together. You're going to get down there to get the interview as well.
I'll have to leave you for the last 400.
As I say, it's a linear approach, this. We've been watching out of our window here a race that's been going on to entertain the crowd, a circuit race. But these boys have been steadily but surely heading to Wevelgem. That race is finished now. Being in Belgium, the winner carried his young baby on the crossbar to the winner's podium. I don't know who it was, of course, it was an amateur race. But these boys are now about to be caught again. Inside 10 kilometers to go. Remember that O'Grady has come up here, but he hasn't used any energy. I'm not sure what that means at this stage of the race, to be absolutely honest.
Well, they've completely changed the topographical nature of this race by moving it away from that very nasty descent of the Kemmelberg. And now we're seeing a rather strange and different race. We've got a group of 5 riders. And, you know, the power of O'Grady has started to stretch that gap out. It's not very much, but he stretched it out by a second or two. And that's going to put a lot of pressure onto Team High Road as they try and get this race sorted out for their big man, Mark Cavendish. When you look at the gap there, you can see that very often the camera foreshortens it. We're looking there at around about 10 seconds for the 5 men here over the front end of the main field, which contains a lot of big names, although I hadn't really quite identified whether or not Tom Bonen was in there. We do know that Oscar Ferreira is there, and we do know, of course, that Mark Cavendish is there for the Isle of Man and, of course, for Team High Road.
But we know Robbie's there, that's right. And all the big names will be on the front when it comes to the sprint. Bet your life on that. Those that have made the selection. The rest of the race is out of it now. It took a while to get rid of the big peloton, but it's gone. And Monjean, setting the pace up front, is going to keep driving this race on for as long as possible. These boys haven't surrendered. There's always a chance here that the sprinters will hesitate. They won't organise, but there are big teams back there who have the power. Team High Road and Lamprey in particular, Rabobank, they should be the teams driving on the front of that bunch right now.
Well, they're all waiting. They're all playing cat and mouse. And there you can see there's confirmation. It's stretched out to 9 seconds, the advantage of the 5 men. And now they are working very well indeed. Once they get into the outskirts of the town of Menen, then it may well slip towards their advantage, because there's a lot of twists and turns once you get into Menen, and it's difficult to organise the tempo on the front end of a main pack.
You can always take the shortcut and jump on the canal, but I think they might get disqualified for that. Just looking at the flags, Paul, in the last half hour, they went from hanging limply to blowing straight out. So they've now got a headwind, these riders, which isn't going to be in the favour of the 5 leaders. There's the boys who have come together. We are only 8 kilometres, that's 5 miles to race. That's about 12 minutes, no more than that. And the peloton are fanning now because the wind looks as though it is beginning to come onto their noses.
Team Rabobank have decided this is the moment now. We've got to pull back those riders into the fold. There's George Hincapie just sitting there. Mark Cavendish moving up to a nice position. I think we may well see a situation here this afternoon where George Hincapie is going to be the pilot fish for Mark Cavendish on the run in towards the line. We've seen Mark Cavendish sprint on a number of occasions this year, and a lot of riders are saying, Phil, there are not many men in this sport as fast as he is over the last 50 metres.
He's won some good his victories in the recent 3 days of De Panne, which is not too far away from here, probably no more than 45 minutes drive by car to the coast. He rode so well at the second stage, and he came underneath through the barriers from absolutely nowhere. He possesses all the qualities of a world-class finisher. He won 11 races in his first season last year, which was more than Robbie McEwen in his first season. And we all know what Robbie's gone on to do.
Robbie's gone on to be one of the greatest, most solid sprinters of the last 10 years of professional cycling. And his idol Mark Cavendish's idol in the sport, just by the way, happens to be Robbie McEwen. And strangely enough, they are very similar build, and they're a very similar kind of sprinter. Although I don't think Robbie McEwen has yet been a world champion on the track.
No, and they've got a very similar impish sense of humour as well. So we'll see how that pans out as time goes in. But these are the teammates now. Judging by the faces on these boys, those 5 leaders are making a run for it. McEwen is dodging in and out of the wheels, about 10 riders down. He is looking for the win today.
Well, to get the win, he and all the other riders in that group behind Phil are going to have to pull back those 5 riders into the fold. Look at that. That's the way to separate and come back together around a directional island. Here is the last big strategic point of the race. Very difficult motorway bridge, and I'll tell you what, after 200 kilometres of racing, that's going to feel like a little bit of a mountain.
We'll have to see if Kinziata fancies the 4,000 metres team pursuit with a change like that. He was straight back into the wheels. Anyway, this looks like it might be Capelli at the back, Capelli rather, at the back now, starting to struggle after the brilliant breakaway he had. These are the riders of Barlow World, because I've seen Baden Cook up here, a possibility of a win for him. I haven't seen Robbie Hunter, but with a bunch like this, it doesn't mean he's not hidden in the pack.
Certainly doesn't, but Robbie, I think, is looking for a little bit of form here this afternoon. Still, these 5 men have to work together as friends for a few more kilometres if they're going to hope to survive off the front end of the main field. We're looking here at 6 seconds, which is really not very much at all in the sport of professional cycling. But their advantage here, Phil, is they are now in the town of Menen. It's left, it's right, it's up and down, and it's round corners, and that can disorganise the front end of the main field. But that is certainly not happening here, because we have got a number of top teams prepared to take the pacemaking and try and chase this all back together.
Oh, Canziato in this breakaway, well known in South Africa. Baller World, I know what he represents, because they had a few riders for Pro Tour teams in South Africa ride in February. World Challenge Series, I think they called it, and he won 2 of the legs. Hunter handled the others comfortably enough, but he's got good form. He's just finished 2nd overall in Dapana, which means he's Mr. Consistent. He didn't win a stage of that race, but he's got good legs, and that's why he's stretching them today. Team High Road, they are the team with the most to lose today, because they probably have got the ammunition if they can bring the race back together again.
Well, you'll be almost certain that if this group comes back together, watch out for a move, a counter move to come from a CSC rider, because there are 2 CSC riders in this group, but in the group behind is the fabulous finishing Fabian Cancellara, and he will have seen the amount of work being done by his teammates O'Grady and Arvidsson in this group. So, Phil, I think once this group does come back together, you can be ready to expect another launch from Team CSC.
Well, this is the last big town before we go streaking into Wevelgem. This is the town of Menen, and this is Canziato setting the pace at the front of the race here. Turned professional back in 2002. He's only won 3 races in his life, and 2 of them are this year. So he's feeling pretty cocky, I reckon.
Well, Rabobank think they've got the power now to pull it all back together. Team High Road have been swept aside for a moment. They're scrambling up and down that main field, looking to see the position of their man, Mark Cavendish. They will try and pace it to the front for about 1 kilometre to go. It's inside of 10 seconds now. It's officially given at 6 seconds, but just looking at it there, I would say we're not much more than 4 or 5 seconds. But there's a couple of riders actually leapt out of the front of that main field and coming across the gap.
These are desperate moments now in Ghent Wevelgem. It's been a very, very good final hour of racing here for the 70th edition of the race. Under the 4 kilometres to go banner there. The long, thin line of riders, they're full out. They're fully committed to catch these riders, which means it is not an easy ride to the line for the sprinters. And it's not automatic the sprinters will lose this, because somebody might have the legs to slip away. Could that be Matt Heyman, Paul?
It looked like Matty Heyman swinging across there. He'd done a big, strong turn at the front end of the main field. He's thinking about Oscar Freire. As you said, Oscar Freire was 3rd in this race last year, looking for a little bit of revenge if he can, because he was beaten by the 2 riders from T-Mobile on that occasion, Burkhardt and Roger Hammond. They took 1st and 2nd place. Canziato will not give up at all here. He's going to wait until the main field there are right on the tail of this breakaway before he slows down.
Oh, well, he's looked over his shoulder. He shouldn't get disheartened, because that gap is still there here, and there's hesitation at the back because they're running out of workers. The sprinters are queuing up, but they need workers to take them to the line. They've now hit the headwind, and that is going to hurt the breakaway, I think, but they're not going to give up. They're going to try for the line.
Arvidsson on the front here now, followed by Elmiger, followed by Stewie O'Grady. They realise how desperate this is. This is always the possibility that it can succeed. Guedon sitting up, he's back in the main field. O'Grady has seen this at a point with 3 kilometres to go when he's not going to give up. He's got the power in those legs of his, and he's gone again, but he's got with him Canziato.
Well, that's it now. 2 riders survive at the front. The rest are washed back into the pack. They were caught at 2.9 kilometres from the finish. Stuart O'Grady, the winner of Paris-Roubaix, just a handful of days away from a defence of that title, is certainly showing us he's ready to go again to the hell of the north. But with Canziato, these guys may have the relief to stay away, because Matt Heyman on the left looks across at the other Rabobank boys, and they haven't closed the gap yet. 2.5 kilometres.
O'Grady comes through. He's still got a little bit of power in those legs of his. All he is waiting for now is a slight pause on the front end of the main field. But, Phil, that is not going to come here this afternoon, because they are closing down the gap. It's all over, and now we have what the Italians like to call a gruppo compacto. That joining, by the way, was done by George Hincapie.
Well, George has used strength, but he might well have put Mark Cavendish in for the victory here at 2.2 kilometres from the line, because that's what Team High Road will be thinking. There's the 2 kilometre yellow banner here. We have different colours in Ghent Wevelgem as we now continue in a straight line towards the finish.
Well, they're all packing up now. You've got to figure out whether or not you've got teammates alongside you. You've got to be up in the front 10 or 12 places. Everyone's looking round. Vicente Garcia Acosta, not one of the great sprinters of the world. Juan Antonio Fletcher, though, is not riding to win the race here for himself. He's riding to win the race for the man in 5th position, and that was Oscar Freire.
As they're using the whole of the right of the road here, a little bit dicey amongst those cars which are parked off the road but still on a clean shoulder. Riders are clipping the edges of them here, but this is hard work now. Juan Antonio Fletcher, who himself has finished second, the best ever finished by a Spanish rider in this race in 2005. Now riding for the rider who finished 3rd last year, Oscar Freire, because this guy delivers when he's right there.
Well, Freire's right up there. He looked nice and calm. But what's happening now, there's a little bit of confusion. There's a new train moving up on the left-hand side of the road, and that will push Oscar Freire back a fraction. And looking down there, it looks as if her team, and in fact it's Bouygues Telecom, have got control at the front end of the main field. 1,000 metres to go now, and Tom Bonen and his men are coming up through the middle.
Well, this is going to be a shoulder-to-shoulder battle from a huge group of riders here. Inside 1,000 metres to the line now as they try to find Tom Bonen. And he's still around there somewhere. Where is Robbie McEwen, another rider who has a habit of popping out? This is a McEwen finish. It's also a Freire finish.
Well, there's Eric Zabel as well, moving up into 4th position. He's moved right up onto the wheel of Oscar Freire, who in fact has got himself now up into 2nd place. Now is a little bit of confusion. Zabel up onto the wheel there of 2nd place rider Oscar Freire, bumping, looking for the slipstream. Riders who've done their turns are swinging over to the right-hand side just to get out of the way.
Oh, there's an awful lot of bumping and barging in the middle, but this is a lead out for the 3-time world champion. Oscar Freire breaks to the left of our picture. Zabel is still trying to handle him. McEwen is in amongst the two. Stoney Steinevolder, but he's been washed away now as Freire tries to go. But is this Zabel going to take it? No. Oscar Freire on the line. It's going to be a photo. It looks as though Freire just about got it on the line.
Well, that was Oscar Freire. The team did a great job there as Cavendish and Roger Hammond up in the play. But Oscar Freire will say a very big thank you, Phil, this afternoon to his teammates because they took him there. They got swamped at about 1 kilometre to go, but they didn't panic. They rode right up through the main field and they got him back into the position that he wanted to be, led him out to perfection, and that gave him the win. And, of course, congratulations there coming from Eric Zabel.
Well, that was a tremendous sprint finish. I thought he'd gone just that little bit too soon, in all honesty. We'll take a look at it again very shortly, but Oscar Freire, who certainly chooses his races when he's in and out of injuries all the time, but when he delivers big. As the bike rider will tell you, one of the most talented boys on the circuit, Oscar Freire. He's now 32 years of age. And this is how he's won it, the perfect lead out, but he had to hit the front very early on here as the challenge came, and the finishing line frankly didn't come. He was just hanging on, but he shows his superior fitness as he takes it right on the line. It's a Bouygues Telecom rider there who's picked off in the 2nd place, I think it was. Oh, it's Alan Davis, I think. Alan Davis it was. That's a huge result for Alan Davis. He needed a big result like that. I didn't recognize him in his doesn't look like Alan Davis over here, so we'll take a break on that one and find out. But no doubt who won it. Oscar Freire, his 69th win of his career and his 3rd win of 2008. Well, there is the sprint, and it could well be Erkki Putsep there, the rider who was waited for when he had a flat tyre in Bouygues Telecom, who got 2nd place over the line. Zabel looks as though he made a top 5 finish. We'll just wait for the photo to give us the full result. And there's the result confirmed. Well, they're saying Aurélien Clerc in 2nd place, although it looked as though he had the number on there of Erkki Putsep. Wouter Weland in 3rd place, Eric Zabel 4th, Kenny De Haes 5th. Very unusual sprint result in the end, wasn't it? Luca Paolini in 6th. Stuart O'Grady hung on for 8th place, and Roger Hammond completing the top 10 for Team High Road in 10th.
Brian, a little bit tough to bring a guy from a World Championships on the track and hope that he's going to win Ghent Wevelgem, but Cavendish was still in the front group at the end.
Yeah, he was. Actually, it shouldn't be possible, but after he won 2 stages in 3 days of the Panne, we have to try it. On a good day, he could win a race like that here. And on the other hand, with Rabobank and Oscar Freire, that was really strong today, so they deserved to win. But I mean, we played our cards right and did what we have to do, and it looked like it was a little bit too short today. That's life.
Hincapie looked rather good as well, and are you confident in Hincapie's chances for the weekend in Paris-Roubaix?
Oh yes, very much, because this morning he told he just would go 80%. So, and it was in the first group after the Kemmer, so that looked pretty good for Sunday to me.
I think George seems quite happy with the team, because in the past his big problem in the big one-day classics has been being very much isolated at the end. But here with the team that you've got, he's got a lot of friends around him in the last 30-40 kilometers.
I can tell you, I hope, of course, Josh is happy with the team here. But on the other hand, I can tell we're damn happy with George also. To have him in the team, we're actually quite proud about it. He's a gentleman. He's quite well respected between all the riders, and he's like an icon to have in the team. You know, everybody, you know, is very respected. And like he's riding now, he's riding like a young kid of 27. Like he's riding like he was in the front attacking and into the Flanders, and again today he was in the front. So it's very motivating for the younger riders to see a little bit older rider riding like that. So that way he gives the whole team very big morale.
Tough race that today, and everybody was trying to look after Mark Cavendish towards the end, but maybe a difficult change from the track to the road.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think it was just, you know, it was quite a hard finish in Ghent-Wevelgem. You know, normally it's a bigger selection before the final, so the sprint's less hectic in Ghent-Wevelgem. But today, you know, a lot of guys got over the Kemmel, and then, yeah, you know, as much as you try to lead him out, he just lost my wheel with, you know, I went back for him with 3 Ks to go, and we were like 60th, brought him back up to about 20th, and then I just lost him, and then, you know, it's chaos. You're just trying to stay upright, so I can't look behind me to see whether he's in my wheel or not, and by the time I realised he wasn't there, it's too late, you know. So
tell me a little bit about that, the chaos of the last 1.5 kilometres, because it's quite rare, really, for Ghent-Wevelgem to have so many riders left.
Yeah, I think the good weather, and actually, you know, they changed the circuit this year. They put it all on near enough cycle paths. You know, in, I don't know, America, they would never appreciate how small these roads are, but you know, they were unbelievably small. So it kind of changed the face of the race. It's hard to race the first half of this race, so it was very easy till the Kemmel, and then the Kemmel's not that hard. Well, it's hard, but it's not hard enough to split, you know, professional peloton. So. And then nice weather, you know, it's not enough wind to cause too many crosswinds. So, yeah, a lot of guys got to the finish. And, yeah, it just made it real chaos. But it's a pity. It's a real pity.
No damage, no injuries, though, and now looking forward to Paris-Roubaix.
No, we had a lot of near misses. I mean, I've lost half a shoe. Cav's lost half a shoe. I've lost half a handlebar where somebody tried to hang his bike on it and at 50 Ks an hour in the beginning. So I think, to be honest with you, we're all just counting our blessings, yeah.
Well, a little bit chaotic on the run in towards the finish there. I heard from Roger Hammond that you were battling, trying to stick near the front.
Yeah, it was just hard, you know. It was just dangerous more than anything, you know. It was on the left-hand side, and you got guys unbelievable dangerous, you know. It's one thing putting yourself in danger, but putting other riders in danger, it's really bad. And I couldn't do anything 5 times in the last 2K. I nearly crashed shoe. I can assume my shoes are gone, but my shoes are in bits now, you know, and that's staying on the bike, you know. So it was so dangerous, but you know, my team did so good to keep me up there.
This happens a lot, though, when a race is sometimes a little bit too easy. There wasn't the big win that the Ghent-Wevelgem normally gets. There wasn't the big selection that it normally gets, and guys suddenly think, I can win a classic, who wouldn't normally be at the front.
That's the thing, you know, in a stage race, then if these people do that, then you got a right to kick off of them, you know, if they think they can win a sprint when they can't sprint. But yeah, for sure, in a one day, you got a lot of guys. In a one day, everybody wants to go for the win, so you know, when there's guys who can't sprint, they just try their luck. So yeah, it gets really dangerous, especially when they're trying to go forward and they're coming backwards.
But you know the race, and next year you'll come back and know what it's all about.
I hope so, you know, but this year would have been perfect still, you know. I'm a little bit disappointed, especially how well the team rode and that. And
thanks very much.
All right, cheers.
Good luck. Funny thing about these Belgian races, you know, we try to get down to the finish to do as many interviews as possible, but it's totally crazy. I mean, if you look down the road right now, this road has been turned into a parking lot of team buses, team cars, team bikes, and we've got to scramble in and out of all of that to try and get a couple of interviews. But fortunately, we got a couple, maybe not the best ones, but you have to take what you can on a day like this. But they are special races, and we still love them anyway.
Well, it was a great sprint, but a most difficult one. And in fact, Oscar Freire saying probably one of the best sprints he's ever won. But Mark Cavendish, Paul, when he finished, he was complaining that everybody thought they were sprinters, and it was very dangerous.
Well, that's part of a learning curve, I think, for Mark Cavendish, because what he's going to have to learn is on days like today, when there wasn't too much wind in Ghent-Wevelgem and the race didn't split up over the Kemmelberg, that you will find a lot of riders who think, for one chance in their life they can win a classic.
Well, they had a shock because one of the best sprinters when he wants to be won today, and in fact Oscar Freire, the first Spanish rider to win the Ghent Wevelgem, and it's taken 70 attempts. He was pretty happy, but his team really gave him the victory.
Well, that's what it was all about. Down towards the end, when there were small breakaways going off the front, they rallied around, they did the job, and they put him there in the right place. But I have to say, a few points as well for Juan Antonio Fletcher, because that pull that he did at around about 2 kilometers to go was a real sterling job.
Team Hyro, by the way, they've kept the lead in the World Cup competition. Andre Greipel, although not starting because of sickness, they didn't get enough points to take him off the top, so he's still the leader. Well, we're packing our bags now. We're leaving Belgium. We're over the border to France. Next time we speak, we'll be at the Queen of the Classics. For Paul, Phil, we'll see you there. Goodbye.